So good morning. The May 10th, 2023 virtual meeting of the Anne Arundel County Council is now in session. We are here today for the final departmental presentations on the proposed FY24 budget. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning, everyone. Mr. Smith.
Present.
Ms. Pickard.
Present.
Mr. Volpe is not here yet. Ms. Hummer, it looks like she's joining. I'm going to circle back here. Ms. Fiedler.
Present.
Ms. Rodvian.
Present.
Ms. Ledbetter, we know, is trying to join, so I'll circle back. Ms. Bolair.
Present.
Let's try Ms. Hummer one more time. Ms. Hummer. I'm going to acknowledge that we can see you. So, Mr. Chair, we do have 5 council members and our county auditor in attendance.
All right. Any opening remarks from any of the colleagues? Any questions, comments? Perfect. See no hands. So we'll begin today's presentation with the Office of Chief Administrative Officer. So please remember to introduce yourself when you speak. At this time, I think, Christine, I saw you earlier. At least I heard you earlier. And Sam, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Christine, did you want to start with the county executive or your CAO budget? I just want to make sure we were on the same page.
I was thinking county executive since it occurs first in the book, but it's up to the chair, whichever he prefers.
Chair, Mr. Chair, is that okay?
Oh, that is fine. Yes.
Okay, so we are going to start on page 85 of the proposed budget book. Christine, I'll hand it back to you.
All right. Good morning. For the record, I'm Christine Anderson, Chief Administrative Officer. I'm excited to be here to present my budget as well as the budget for the County Executive's Office. As Sam said, we are going to start on page 85. Just as a reminder, the budget for the County Executive staff is broken into 2 pieces, the County Executive staff and the CAO budget. We are actually moving some pieces back and forth between those. So hopefully I can help make that clear and clarify any questions that we have. We're just trying to realign some things a little bit better. So there are 3 main components in the County Executive's budget. That's the Economic Development Corporation, Laurel Racetrack, and the VLT community grants. I just wanted to flag for you that we're actually moving the budget for the Economic Development Corporation out of the County Executive's budget into the CAO budget. And I'll explain why when we get to that page. If you turn to page 87, this is an overview of the County Executive's budget, and you'll see that there's a minor decrease in general fund spending of about $10,000. Again, the largest changes here are the movement of the Economic Development Corporation position, which is a county position, over to the CAO budget. We are also moving the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion position from the CE budget to the CAO budget. And that is in line with the County Executive's initiative to create the Office for Equity and Human Rights. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit as well. There are 2 new positions here in this budget, the Director of Government Relations and a Legislative Assistant. This just allows us to further build out our ability to advocate for the county at all levels of government and support elected officials such as yourselves, but also at the state and federal level with any issues, questions, or needs that the county and the residents might have. One other position move that's important to highlight is there was a position sitting in the Office of Central Services, and that person was detailed up to the County Executive's budget and was in charge of events, Director of Events, Community Engagement Events, and we're just going to move that position back underneath the County Executive's budget. That makes the most sense to have it there. That's where they were reporting for the past year. There are some other minor changes in contractual services and supplies and material. As I mentioned on page 88, you'll see is the Economic Development Corporation, and they are presenting to you later today. So if that's all right, I will skip that. And then on page 89, we've got the Laurel Racetrack funding, and there is a list provided for you in the budget book, the various recipients of the funding from the racetrack impact aid. And then on page 90 is the VLT community grants. And we're, again, probably not going to go into too much detail here, but the list for you is on page 149 of the budget book, and the grants are actually administered by the Arundel Community Development Services, and they will also be before you shortly, and I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any specific questions. Similar to the Laurel Racetrack aid, the budget here is reflective of the local development council's decision-making process. So I'll pause there. That's the county executive's budget. Can I answer any questions?
So, quick question on constituent services. That's obviously nested in his budget, correct?
Yes.
Is there any metrics on how they perform when it comes to responding or resolving? I know we have like was it 811 or 411 number that we dial. Is there any data that talks about how well that organization is doing?
Yes, I believe it's on our Arundel stat page, and I can certainly pull that up and just take a quick look. But absolutely, it's 311. Actually, for anyone listening, if you do have any questions or concerns, you can always call 311, and the county staff will be happy to assist and get you to the right place. I'm just going to see if I can find it quickly, and if not, we will get back to you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll have to get back to you. I'm not finding it quickly, but we can certainly provide any data on the number of inquiries we get and resolutions.
Check. Any additional comments from Ms. Feeble?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question on page 91, the position exempt page for the county executive's office. You noted that one position was moving back under the CE for event director. Which one of that list is that position?
That one is the administrative assistant to the county executive. And I misspoke. I didn't mean back under, but the position's been under the county executive's staff at detailed from the Office of Central Services for the past year. And we're just actually reflecting it now in the budget of making it an official transfer. So it is the administrative assistant to the county executive.
And there's two
Yeah.
of those.
So
Okay.
one of them is new and I see you're exactly right. One of them is new and one of them is a reclassification of an existing employee.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thanks for that.
Any additional comments or questions? If not, I guess we'll switch over to your department.
Me, sure. Sam, did you want to start or do you want me to?
Yep, I'm happy to do it. Chief at Sam Chiriaco Budget Office, for the record. If you flip to page 102 in the budget book, that is where the Chief Administrative Officer's budget starts. I'll hand it back to you, Christine.
Thank you. Again, for the record, Christine Anderson, CAO. As Sam said, we're starting on page 102. There are 7 different funds that flow through this budget, some of which are actually outside of the direct control of the CAO's office. The Community Development Fund, Visitors Bureau Fund, Arts Council funds, Workforce Development, Housing Trust Fund, General Fund, and Grant Funds. That just explains some of the different fund sources. And again, some of those budgets you will actually hear directly from the staff that are in charge of them. For instance, the Community Development and Housing Trust Fund will be discussed during the Arundel Community Development Services Corporation presentation later today. You'll also be hearing from the Workforce Development Agency, and their budget will be discussed by them when they come forward. I did want to pause, Mr. Chairman. I see Ms. Fiedler's hand is up. That question, I didn't want to keep going if, okay. All right, very good. So I will take an opportunity now to highlight some of the changes that are actually occurring in the CAO's budget. First, page 104, there are 2 positions associated with the Police Accountability Board. There is an increase in just the personal services, and we actually experienced a decrease in operating costs, which partially offsets that Police Accountability Board. As you know, it's a new program and we are still getting up and running, but we've hired a wonderful new, thanks to you, you all approved our new executive director, and we're excited to work with her moving forward. Page 105 is the Economic Development Corporation, and they will be here later today. The largest portion of the CAO's budget is on page 106, called Management and Control. And I'm going to run through some of the changes that are taking place here. We've got several changes in the personnel. As I mentioned, several new positions that are coming over from the county executive's budget. We are also requesting 2 new positions to start the Office of Equity and Human Rights. That's in addition to the Director of EDI, that position bring over, as well as Asha Smith, position that will move over, giving that office 4 total positions if you approve the 2 new ones that we've requested. There's also going to be an addition of a position as the Director of Office and Hispanic, Latino, and multicultural resources. You heard the county executive talk about this in his budget speech. We felt that it was very important that as our immigrant community grows and as the minority populations in our county grow, particularly Hispanics and Latino populations, that having a staff person directly responsible for working with them, assisting nonprofits to get help to the community members that are entering our community or maybe have been here a while and are still having a hard time navigating services. And then finally, there's a new position for the nonprofit incubator that will be moving into 41 Community Place. We'll be getting started with some minor renovations, hopefully over the summer. We need to bring this position on now so that they can help recruit for and start training of the nonprofits that would be part of the incubator program. And then there is also a project manager under one of our DCAOs. Each DCAO has a project manager support person. Previously, this existed under previous budgets, but those were detailed from other agencies. So this year we are asking for one new position to be able to formalize that relationship as well. And then there's also a reclassification of a position from an EX13 to an EX16, which I would have to look up and remind myself exactly the position titles. So those are the major position changes happening in the CAO budget. We do have some minor changes in supplies and materials, again, due to the addition of some of these new functions and focuses. We are also seeing a decrease in ARPA funds, coming out of this budget. Again, the money is dwindling as the budget officer has spoken about. I believe that is the highlights of everything I did want to focus on today. So I'm happy to pause and take any questions.
I don't see any hands at this moment. So, oh, there she is, Ms. Ledbetter.
Thank you. I was having trouble finding, it's like always a couple clicks off, I feel like, with that raise hand option. I just had a quick question about the Veterans Affairs position that I know is currently the proposal is to house it under the Department of Aging. And I'm just curious as to the thought process between putting it there versus the position or department under the chief administrative officer, like some of these other coordinators are. I just, as a military spouse, I mean, we've moved, we've gone to places. Department of Aging is not as a military family where I think I would intuitively go in search of services, because so much of our population, our veteran population, is not necessarily older. And so I just, if you could just elaborate on why you put it where you did versus putting it under this umbrella here.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. It's a very good question. The Department of Aging and Disabilities staff are very familiar with all programs that might benefit older populations, disabled populations, but also veterans populations. There is overlap in some of the programs that are available. And we have found in the past that the folks that need that support do tend to call aging, or they are directed there from another county agency. Obviously, if this does not work, we can reassess it in future years, but we feel that the people that are in the Department of Aging already and adding an additional person to focus on working with veteran population I think is the right place for it. The county executive staff will still be very involved. We are supportive of Blue Star families. In fact, we are going to be hosting an event with them in the fall at a county park. So there's certainly coordination across county government, but we felt the position being in the Department of Aging and Disabilities was the right place for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, on that line, how did you gauge the success or non-success of the previous process that we had in place when it came to supporting veterans through one of the I would say private partnerships that we had with the county, with one of the organizing entities? What was go ahead? I don't know if you were involved in that, but
I was a
okay.
little bit. We gauged that based on the contract that we had with them and the actual outcomes that we were looking at. The Department of Aging and Disabilities had some specific metrics they were looking at, and they felt like this was something that we could certainly do in-house. It wasn't a decision that it was being done badly or poorly, or that there was anything negative there, but we felt like based on the services that were being provided, having that actually inside county government as opposed to an arm's length contractual relationship made a lot more sense.
Is this person going to be a claims officer? Like what sort of attributes will this new position have?
Definitely similar to a claims officer, but it's certainly someone trained in all of the programs and best able to help navigate. I prefer, instead of claims officer, I like the term navigator, but someone who can take a veteran or their family by the hand and make sure that their needs are met in the best way possible. There's a lot of services in county, state, and federal government that we can line people up with, and that position will be the one to best do that.
Can I ask you if the Veterans Affairs Committee was informed of that? Were they involved in that discussion?
Yes, absolutely. Staff reached out to them and explained sort of the thinking and where we were heading with this. So I know that there was some concerns with sort of the way the decision was made, but I assure you that we did reach out and speak to them. And I just would say, give us a chance to show that this is the right way to do this. I know there's some trepidation, and that's understandable, but we do believe this is the right way to go forward.
So I see, Madam Vice Chair, what are you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had some similar questions. You basically have answered them along the lines of how county government engages with all our veterans. I know they span a wide age range, as Councilwoman Ledbetter was mentioning, but I know there are a lot of different veterans agencies and active and military installations here in the county. I'll have to go look and review our Arundel stats to see who's coming to the county government to seek counsel and navigation. There's lots of places to go in Anne Arundel County for services, I would assume, as a veteran. We're I don't know, was that some of the analysis of where to put this? It's our older generation is seeking support versus younger military families.
Yeah, I mean, we looked at that, but we felt like the overlap with what agencies were already providing these services and connecting to the programs that could help veteran families were actually already in existence. That knowledge, that skill is within the Department of Aging and Disabilities. Your favorite agency, as I remember hearing you say.
All right. If there are no additional.
If I may, excuse me, I'm sorry. I was just too. I didn't realize I was muted. You know, the one thing about the Department of Aging that I have found, and it's the Department of Aging and Disability Services, right, is there's just no wrong door there. They're so responsive, and wherever, if someone comes to them and it's not exactly where they need to be, they just have that no wrong door. How do we get to a yes? How do we serve this person, and how do we connect them and hold their hand through that connection process? So they really are equipped to handle. It's a great agency for sure.
Couldn't have said it
Thank
better.
All right. We'll, I guess, transition to the next. Is there any other pieces, Christina, that you needed to weigh in on?
No, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Easy. So if I see no additional hands, so I think we will transition now to officer personnel.
Mr. Chair, there are, I believe, 3 capital projects that Naomi McAllister needs to be let in for that are related to the Chief Administrative Officer.
All right, sounds like a plan.
Thank you.
Naomi is rejoining as a panelist. Mr. Chair, I also want to note we have Ms. Ledbetter and Mr. Volke are both in attendance at this point in time.
Thank you. All right, capital projects it is.
Good morning, council members. Naomi McAllister, Capital Budget Analyst. The CAO's office does have two capital projects. The first one in your capital budget book is on page 21. It is C1067, Advanced Land Acquisition. The fiscal year 24 request is for $5 million. This capital project is used for acquisitions as properties are identified in capital projects in the next 5 years. The $5 million does have a $1.5 million state grant included in there. The next capital project is located on page 42. It's Arundel Medical Center. And this is the final financial contribution toward the medical center's inpatient mental health facility. The request for fiscal year 24 is for $500,000. And that concludes the capital portion.
Go ahead, Ms. Pickert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask about the total of the land acquisition. Are we confident that that is the right amount of land acquisition dollars as we move forward in purchasing land for schools or parks or whatever we may need in the next year? Just checking.
Sure. Naomi McAllister, Capital Budget Analyst. Yes, DPW, actually, it's a county-wide process. And we do look at the needs of the capital program for the next 5 years and what's available and potentially in the pipeline. And at this juncture, we feel that $5 million is sufficient for fiscal years 24.
Okay.
Right. I did want to go to Ms. Rabian. Just briefly, I know there is some Annapolis. Would this be the bin for some Annapolis requests that might come up potentially in a future supplemental, Ms. Rabian, or would that be a different category? I just assume General County might be that for the Annapolis piece that the mayor has certainly been phoning everyone on.
Mr. Chair, I wasn't prepared to talk about this right now.
Okay. Well, we don't have to.
But I mean, I can basically briefly describe if folks are interested. You caught me a little off guard.
No, I'm sorry about that, Mr. Trumbo.
That's all right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris Trumeyer, Budget Officer. I guess typically we would not use advanced land to purchase acquisitions in the city of Annapolis. Where we partnered with the city has generally been on program open space acquisition, which is in the Rec and Park budget, and we discussed that at the time. So usually advanced land is what we do to purchase properties that will either someday or now be the location of future county facilities. So I think you're probably looking at program open space.
You're probably right. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Any additional questions on general? I'm looking at the capital book here on the capital program for the county executive or CAO. All right. Seeing none, I think we will now transition over to officer personnel.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, Stephen Tarou from the Budget Office. The Office of Personnel's budget can be found on page 159 of your operating budget book. Before I turn it over to Ms. Podowski to go over her presentations, I do want to brief touchly on the health insurance fund on page 163 of your budget book. The county is self-insured. The Office of Personnel is responsible for administering the health claims of the county employees. You can see that we do expect claims to go up. That's in personal services, going from $100 million to $107 million, offset slightly by a slightly lower contribution to the OPEB fund. That's all I really have for the health insurance fund, unless anyone has any questions. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Ann and her team to go through her presentation.
Thank you, Stephen. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, council members, and Madam Auditor. For those of you who I have not met in person, I am Ann Badowski, Personnel Officer for the Office of Personnel. And it's a pleasure to be with you this morning to talk about my FY24 proposed budget. As Stephen said, our budget does start on page 159. I do have a presentation to that I will guide you through to give you some, thank you very much, Laura. Okay. You can move on to the next slide. For those of you who don't know, all of the duties that we have, we are actually unique in the fact that we work with employees for their entire life cycle, from the day they walk through the door and then the day they leave our door, and then even beyond. From recruitment and new employee orientation to promotions and retirements, providing benefits for a single employee to one with a growing family, from timekeeping and the biweekly processing of payroll for all of our employees and contract employees, to processing the monthly retirement benefits for our retirees, and all the phases in between. We union negotiations, employee relations, as well as the transitioning and educating and training of our employees. You can go to the next page. In addition to all of those activities, we do have several other things that we do, and I just want to highlight some of them for you. We did negotiate 11 labor agreements this year. I have a summary and as part of this, and you can ask questions about that. We can go through it a little bit later if you would like. We had an RFP, and we awarded a contract for a health benefits consultant who is Aon. They have been our partner, and they are fantastic to work with. We have transitioned from a Care First environment to an Aetna environment for our medical plan services for our active employees and our under 65 retirees. We have been working with a vendor to do a cost and comp study, and they have been reviewing over 400 county classifications. As part of that, and looking at those steps and how we compare to our peers and what those classifications and min quals look like. We continue to evaluate and examine some of their findings and their data that they've been looking at. Additionally, we implemented an online testing method for our sheriff, fire, and police communication operators to increase our flexibility in testing opportunities. We have expanded our employee wellness initiatives in conjunction with our health providers and our employee groups. We have expanded to topics such as mental health and financial well-being. Those are things that we've expanded our virtual wellness programs on this past year, and we will continue to do that. Laura, the next page. We continue to graduate employees from our leadership development program. This is something we started a couple of years ago, and we've had cohorts of 25 for the past 2 years. And we graduated another class this year, which we're excited about. It is a unique partnership that we have with the Arundel Community College for our supervisory level, mid-supervisory level employees here. And additionally, we have made some enhancements to our deferred comp plan, which is a third leg of retirement savings for folks to include Roth savings options. So those are just some of the highlights of the additional things that we have done in our over the past year. Okay, you can go ahead, Laura, sorry. So our FY24 proposed budget is $8.8 million. This is a slight increase over last year, most of which is all attributed to the pay package and benefit increases in our budget, as 76% of our entire budget for this office is in personal salaries and benefits. We are full complement of 42, and on Thursday we'll have Thursday we'll only have 5 vacancies when I have a new assistant personnel officer for employee relations starting, which I'm very excited about. The proposed budget does not include any real major projects for the next fiscal year, but it does include continued funding for our countywide tuition reimbursement program, as well as our critical skills and training opportunities that we partner again with Anne Arundel Community College with, as well as a third cohort of our leadership development program. Our proposed budget also does include the request for 1 new personnel analyst 3 position to work in our class and comp unit. This is a unit of only 2, and the workforce, our county workforce has just grown. This unit has not. The workload there is in high demand most of the time, whether it's through reclass requests, desk audits, or other reviews of our classifications. You can move on. And then the following pages, and I won't walk through each one of them specifically, but we did negotiate 11 contracts this year. All the agreements have been ratified and they are all one-year contracts. I have provided to Madam Auditor a list of all the tentative agreed to items and this summary to all of you as well. And for the most part, a COLA and merit increase were negotiated with each union. Allowances, the creation of a civil disturbance unit, and some other individual issues were agreed to with each union, but they're unique to those unions. I can take questions on individual pieces if you want, and that is all I have to share at this moment. I'm happy to take any questions.
Ms. Ravi, I see your hand raised.
Thank you. It was on a slide, a couple slides back, but it was a new firearms program, and it looked like it was in the detention officer. So I was just curious about that. I'm kind of, yeah.
Sure. The both the detention plans, there's two unions there, the detention, a FODCOP, and then of the detention sergeants. They both currently have a SORT/firearms program. One is for the SORT program is very unique, and it currently exists right now for both of those units. And it is about the specialty training and the allowance that is given when you have to do extractions. If there are certain situations within the centers that require extractions from cells and that require special training. It also requires the use of knowing how to use a firearm and that you're certified in that. The department was moving away because the number of actual cell extractions have been low for the past 3 and 4 years. What they were looking to do, it's more important for them to have members who are certified to carry firearms than it is to actually have the cell extraction. So we were just migrating that program. The SORT is now becoming firearms only. So those who do transport and those kinds of things. And so there's special training to go on for that they have to maintain year over year, and there is an allowance to be paid for that.
Okay, so that's training.
Yes. And,
Okay.
and your ability to actually carry the gun there is, because that is not part of the daily requirement.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
No worries.
And I now see Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Badowski, for that presentation. I actually included the first few pages of the budget brief from the County Executive's Office in a recent newsletter, and I had 3 questions come in from a constituent that I think may be best answered by you. If not, please feel free to direct me to each individual department.
Sure.
But the constituent was asking what percentage of the county workforce is still working remotely or hybrid, and then apply that to the merit step pay proposal for all represented and non-represented employees. And I understand the represented employees, those agreements have been reached, but for the non-represented county employees, are those merit steps awarded based on tenure or an evaluation process? What does that look like?
Sure. I will have to get back to you on the specific percentage of employees that are still teleworking. I will tell you that it is only for classifications that are eligible to telework, and there certainly are the vast majority of our employees cannot, right? So it is generally, if you narrow it only to those who are non-represented, that is the largest group that are eligible. And even within that, there are only certain classifications that are eligible to do that. There is a telework policy that is available on Ask Ann, and the policy still allows for up to 3 days of teleworking for those classifications that are eligible. That works within that unit and supervisor approved, of course. I would have to get back to you on the specific percentage of employees that are still doing that 1 to 3 days a week. As it relates to merit increases for non-represented employees, those are based on a performance evaluation that is done annually on the date of hires, generally your anniversary date. So those are done. And then if the budget includes a merit increase, those employees then are given the first pay period following that successful evaluation.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
And then I see Mr. Volkey.
Morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Ms. Podolsky, good morning. So question for you about the 1-year term on the contracts. I think last year, many of the contracts that were negotiated were also 1-year contracts. Looks like this year we're again in 1-year contracts. If I think back in my memory to earlier in my first term, some of our first term, we would often see more along the lines of 2 or 3 year negotiated agreements. Is there some theory or some strategy in these shorter 1-year deals? Is it advantageous to the county? What's sort of the theory in terms of the bargaining with respect to the length or the term of the deal?
Ann Badowski, Personnel Officer. Thank you, Councilman. You know, it's been interesting. The 1-year agreements require a lot of energy and work and lifting, heavy lifting from all parties each year. We try to get multi-year agreements. I think we have historically had some unions with multi-year agreements. I will tell you that there was a period where there was a 3 or 4 year multi-year agreements that a lot of the unions had. And then when we hit a recession, had to open up those agreements and take back some of those negotiated items. And that memories are long. And so there's thought process to not go to extended contracts that far. Recently, I think with the economy, inflation the way it is, I think, you know, as in county, we are probably a little more conservative on how what a 2 or 3 year contract would look like, given the economy and how it's been that we have stuck with a 1-year agreement. And the unions, we have entertained thoughts of a 2-year if there was a way to get there that was palatable for both sides.
May I follow up, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Podolsky. So understanding that it's sort of the combination of the economy, what you can get from the other side, what makes sense for the county, I recognize all that. I also recognize the tremendous amount of effort that your folks have to put in year over year to negotiate annual agreements, which with all those bargaining units is a lot. Were there discussions with any of the bargaining units this year about multi-year agreements, or did the county find it advantageous this year to enter into single-year agreement?
We really only had serious conversations with the 2-year agreement with one union this year. It was really singly focused this year.
Okay. And then, so sort of continuing on this train of thought, so I know Social Security, there's going to be significant COLAs that are coming. Inflation is very, very high, et cetera. If we hit into a recessionary time period or, you know, the economy slows down, what have you, do you think that in that moment it would make sense for the county to negotiate multi-year agreements? Or do you think that it continues to be advantageous for the county to try to go year over year and do the work?
I think that would have to be based on sort of where the forecasting looks like to see what is the best for the county. Really. And we would just take that as the approaching year comes upon us.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
No, it's you know, it's funny you mention that because I'm actually a fan of multi-year agreements. Our CIP plan, for example, is a multi-year plan. And every year, even though we know in 25, 26, you know, in the out years, each year we still review what is proposed in the next fiscal year. And so when it comes to some of these union contracts, knowing that, hey, we have a plan to do X in year 2 or year 3 might make, even if during the current budget year, before we approve it, it'll still require a review. But if they can plan in year 2 and year 3 with their members that, hey, we anticipate getting this in year 2, year 3, we may find, and this isn't on you in general, I'm just saying, generally speaking, just like with the federal government, when we do the FIDEP, Future Years Defense Program, it's a multi-year budget. Every year we're reviewing what we plan to do 2, 3, 4 years from now. So it's not like we won't get an opportunity to look at that plan the next or the subsequent year. But it's just something I think as a county we should probably look into, because I think it'll help especially with some of the larger organizations and some of the unions, know what to expect in the future years. And if there's an economic downturn, when that budget year is, it comes in place, we can then, sort of make, y'all see Mr. Trumbauer's hand going up there. We can just make adjustments if we need to, but certainly something I think we should at least investigate or look into to see how feasible it would be to implement something like that. Mr. Trumbauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris Trumbauer, Budget Officer. Just to kind of reinforce and reiterate what our personnel officer said, the county is certainly interested in multi-year deals for the reasons we all know. It takes a lot of effort to do one-offs every single time. The fact of the matter is right now, we are in a very high inflation environment, and it's not a good time to be negotiating multi-year deals with such economic uncertainty ahead. For instance, I know for a fact, if we were to negotiate a 2 or 3 year deal with high COLAs in the subsequent years, and then inflation went down, some council members that I'm looking at in my screen that may have just asked the question may be questioning us, why on earth did we do that? So it is, we can't predict the future. We try and do the best. Anne and her team do a great job. The budget office tries to work with them with economic guidance, and it is not an exact science. But we share the administration in general shares the council's interest in multi-year deals. I think the bargaining units, some of them at least, would like multi-year deals, but sometimes the environment just isn't set up in a way that makes that possible. So I hope that adds a little bit more insight into the to this very interesting topic.
No, I think it does. And I wasn't, as I mentioned before, each year would give us an opportunity to reassess where we're at, depending on the economic sort of environments that we find ourselves in. That doesn't prevent, and I keep going back to our fight up, even though the counties, we have to be a balanced budget. We can't be like the federal government where we can just write a check and pass it on to future generations. So I totally understand that aspect of it. It's just something that I think long-term could potentially be a benefit to the county. Mr. Vogt, because it's probably in line with this past comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Trumbauer, good morning. I appreciate that. I understand that concern that you're saying, and I probably would ask those questions in the out years. The question that I would ask you, and I truly don't know the answer to this, is there a way to put something in any of these negotiated agreements where you say, we agree to blank, but there is this contingency that in the event of inflation at this percentage, or if some of our assumptions change, et cetera, then that gives us the ability to come back to the table and review this. Do you include that in these negotiated agreements? Is there some sort of trigger like that allows you to come back and sort of say the economic conditions have changed? The assumptions we were all operating under are now no longer the same assumptions? And I don't know the answer to that. That's why I'm curious.
Ann Badowski, Personnel Officer. There are wage reopener clauses in the contracts. So those do exist because we have single year contracts. They don't talk about assumptions going forward. If that is something where we went to and we could agree on a second or third year package that worked for everybody, that then would need to be changed. We would try and include language like that would, give us something to, as another wage reopener to say, unfortunately this, the economy, the inflation, whatever the case may be, but we are just not in that situation at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a legitimate way to hedge against the concerns that Mr. Trumbauer was noting. So I get it. I'm just curious to what extent those can be employed. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Ms. Ravi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just having spent a fair amount of time looking at all of these conversations from the union perspective as an active member, I think it also, the bargaining units themselves can be very reluctant because they're also, as Mr. Trumbauer mentioned, that the conditions are very uncertain going forward, where, we have people even right now saying, oh, we're going to be heading into a recession. Other people saying we're not heading into a recession. So, coming up with any sort of certainty on a more extended contract when no one knows exactly what's going to happen, I think is really a big gamble for both the county and the bargaining units. So I'm interested in the idea of, planning versus an actual out year contract, but I also worry that that could end up, I feel like there could be litigation around what, when the conditions, if you put certain conditions in, then we have to go back and reopen, or we will go back and reopen. I think you'd have to be very careful about defining what those conditions are, because reasonable people can, I think, disagree about when certain conditions have been met. So anyway, I just wanted to add my thoughts on that subject, because I do think there's definitely value in it, but I also see from both the county and the bargaining unit's perspective of why they would be reluctant, especially in the current environment with, with the economic uncertainty that we're sort of staring down. We've seen interest rates going up. We thought maybe they were going to start to level off. When I'm talking specifically about the Federal Reserve, we thought we're maybe going to level off, but we got another quarter point. And who knows, I think now we're saying, okay, well, it probably will level off. Well, we may also see another quarter point in the next meeting. And I think all of those things really leave too much uncertainty. So.
Mr. Volker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Different topic. So, Ms. Badowski, one of the things you talked about was the changeover from CareFirst to Aetna. And I had gotten some information from folks who at least purported to know some of the reasons for why that change was made. And I think there may have been some cost savings involved in it, but I'd heard that there were also some coverage issues, specifically with CareFirst and not covering gender affirmation surgery, or what's sometimes also referred to as sex reassignment surgery. Is that part of the reason why the county needed to change over the providers, the health insurance from CareFirst to Aetna? Was that one of the considerations in terms of any RFPs that you all put out to insurance companies to find out who would be the provider?
Ann Badowski, Personnel Officer. No, the county conducted an actual competitive RFP, as we do every 5 to 6 years, for new medical benefits for our active and under 65 employees and retirees. And the fact that CareFirst does offer their services, those were things that we had never had asked for in our contract. The RFP did include the request if your provider did, or your company did provide their services, but that was not a reason for the change. We were obligated to compete for the benefits, and we did that. And there were some cost savings, right? But administratively, no, it was an entire package of ability to perform. And any issues that we've had with coverage in general, we've been able to work with Aetna to match better, or to create some unique groups for us, so that folks who had services like mental health services that had doctors covered in CareFirst that were not, we have created a unique coverage group for those employees here under Aetna.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Badowski, a quick question. The fire and police, when it comes to their hiring actions, how involved are they if they put out an announcement for class? You all obviously carry a lot of the load when it comes to an initial selection of candidates. Are they involved at that level when it comes to those initial wave of applicants coming in?
We work hand in hand with both the police and the fire departments through their recruitment process. They are with us at the table from the day the job gets posted through the written, oral backgrounds. In fact, their departments are the ones who conduct the backgrounds. There's several different steps in the process to hire, both for police and fire academies, and we work very closely with the departments at all levels.
So you all don't filter any applicants that come in before the police and then hand them sort of your qualified applicants?
I'm sorry, Ann Badowski, Personnel Officer. The filter is actually the applicant's ability to get through the process, right? They have to pass a written and agility in the police department. They have to, after the application, they go through a written and agility test. They have their application goes through a preliminary background conducted by the police department. And then then those who pass those steps continue to move through the process. The next process and the next step in the process is an oral. interview, and then it moves through. And so I say the elimination, the screening comes from the applicant's ability to continue to move through that. And then when they get through and pass a full background, that then becomes what we call an eligibility list. And if there's a score to be had or a cutoff based on the number of vacancies the department has, depending on how many people are on that list, determines how many people they get certified. So if a department has 25 vacancies and they have 50 applicants, sometimes we send them all the applicants because not everybody will get through the rest of that process because they get conditional offer letters. They then have to pass CDS, psych, and other steps, right? These are all different things. So it does depend on the number of applicants, but we don't screen. There have been differences in the two different departments, right? In the fire department, we have a lot more applicants than we have seats. In the fire department, we sometimes have less applicants than we have seats.
Understood. All right, thank you.
And I'm happy to sit down and walk through more details with that if you're interested. I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Any additional comments for office personnel? All right, well, thank you, Ms. Ann. I think now we will switch over to Office of Law. Darlene, I think you were going to do some introductions here.
It's Bo Zo is the analyst, Mr. Chair.
Got it. Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and the council members. This is Bo Zhao, budget analyst for the Office of Law. Their budget starts on page 92 of the proposed budget book. I will now turn over to Greg for his presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, council members. Greg Swain, County Attorney. When the new members were sworn in a couple months ago, I gave a detailed overview of the Office of Law, so I won't repeat that, but I did want to just say a few words about our operation. You are familiar with many of our government operations attorneys who appear before you a couple times a month and provide support, research, and advice for your legislative efforts and also support for the administration and your legislative work. Our government operations section is responsible for prosecution of code enforcement cases, animal control cases, purchasing matters, tax sales, generally all land use matters, and then general legal advice to county departments on matters involving the county code or legal issues. Laurie Blair Klossmeyer is the deputy county attorney for this section, and Kelly Kenny is the supervisor, and I think you know both of them pretty well. In addition to them, we have, in total, we have 10 attorneys, 2 support staff, and 2 paralegals in our government operations section. Our litigation team provides all litigation-related services to represent the county, including legal defense for any claims against the county or the Board of Education under the county's self-insurance fund. The litigation section also handles all workers' compensation matters, personnel matters, and assists with requests under the Maryland Public Information Act, as well as miscellaneous, all types of civil litigation. This section also handles our affirmative litigation efforts, which involve the opioid cases and some other cases that we have. Hamilton Tyler is the deputy county attorney for the litigation section, and Phil Culpepper is the supervisor. We have 10 attorneys, 4 support staff, and 2 paralegals in our litigation section. And finally, our human services team represents the Department of Social Services and provides legal support and representation in litigation relating to children in need of assistance matters, termination of parental rights, and adult guardianships. Ham Tyler is also the deputy for that section, and Kevin Outing is the supervisor. We have 3 attorneys and 1 support staff in the human services section. And in addition to our sections, we also have myself, my administrative assistant, our office manager, Sharon Hawthorne, and our head paralegal, Pam Groves, who I think you also know. So Ham and Sharon are here with me today. In total, we have 24 attorneys, 7 support staff, 5 paralegals, 36 total in the Office of Law. As you'll see, our budget is primarily personal services. We've asked for 2 supplemental items this year, one of which is to reclassify an existing vacant secretary position to a management assistant 2, and that reclassification has already been approved by Bill 723. The other supplemental request is for a summer intern position, which we did as a paid intern last year and look forward to doing that again in the future. So happy to answer any questions, and we're asking for a favorable review. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I've known you some time now.
Yes, sir.
Quick question on the obviously, the Board of Health is something that I'm interested in, and I know this isn't budget related to some extent, but if you can, not necessarily at this moment, or provide, I guess, an updated sort of legal opinion on our role as the Board of Health, and if there are any lateral limits that you think exist there. I'm just interested in seeing what that looks like from your perspective.
Right. Well, with the Board of Health, we have given various opinions over the years as to the authority of the board of the county council sitting as the Board of Health. And we recently did an updated version of that. So I'm happy to provide that, which I think lays out in detail exactly what those requirements are and what the obligations are under the Board of Health.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair and Mr. Swain, that updated memo was shared with the entire council before the May 3rd meeting of the Board of Health. So if that's what you're referencing, you might have to know that everyone does have a copy.
Oh, okay. I thought it was okay. The other thing is, how many vacancies do you have in your attorneys, for your attorneys specifically?
For the attorneys, right now we have one, and that's since part of the, I guess it's county executive staff. Ethan Hunt is an attorney with our office, and he is moving to the county executive staff to work with Pete Barron. So that will create a vacancy that we will fill. And I think that's all we have right now is just that one vacancy as far as attorneys go.
Cool. Any other questions from the council members? All right, Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Swain, I appreciate your presentation. Just a quick follow-up to the staff member moving to the county executive's office. I don't know if Christine's still here, but what in that county executive's budget is that position that Ethan's moving to?
I can't recall the title. It's going to be more, one of Ethan's background has been heavily involved with state legislative matters, and he's worked from various things for us. So he's going to be, as my understanding is, he's going to be assisting Pete with his legislative duties to council, as well as providing additional support for the state legislative matters. So, but I don't know what his position title is going to be.
Okay, I'll follow up. Thank you.
This is Sam Chiriaco from the budget office, Ms. Fiedler. I can answer your question if you'd like. Since I was the analyst I'm still here from the chief administrative officer's budget. He's going to be, his official title, if you look at the position page, is going to be assistant to the county executive, but his working title is going to be, which Christine mentioned, director of government relations, which she mentioned in her presentation. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Any additional questions from council members? All right. Seeing none, Mr. Swain, again, thank you for your expertise, and look forward to reviewing your budget.
Thank you all. Nice seeing you. Good morning.
Thank you. And so now we will switch over to our favorite budget officer, Mr. Trombauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm joined by Bo Zhao, who's the budget analyst for the budget office. I'm Chris Trombauer, budget officer, and I'm here to present the most boring 6 pages of the budget book to you all. You can find the Office of the Budget beginning on page 153. And if you simply just look over to the next page and see our table of expenditures, you'll see that nothing has changed. We've just adjusted the pay package in personal services. So if you were to look on page 11 of the budget book, you would see the timeline for budget development. And you can see pretty much we begin the upcoming year in September. We finish it in July with the approved book. And that's pretty much what we do. We spend the summer on summer projects that largely come out of questions or initiatives that we've discovered while analyzing the upcoming budget. And then we work with you all in the auditor's office during these 45 days to make a good budget even better. So I don't have a lot of excitement to present to you today. But if you have any specific questions about our little office of 9, I'm happy to entertain them at this time.
I feel like I should ask something, but I trust you, Chris. So I have no questions at this time. Any council members for the budget office?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We will strive to continue to be boring going forward for the remainder of the term. It's now my honor to present the Island of Misfit Toys to you all, which is officially known as Finance Non-Departmental. So this is a series of pages in the budget book that I will run through very quickly. But this is basically various funds and contributions that don't have a home in other departments. So we consolidate them under Finance Non-Departmental, and we can consider this the appetizer before the Department of Finance comes before you after this. So if you'll buckle in and go along with me, you can start on page 135. This is the summary and comparative statement of expenditures for all the Finance Non-Departmental funds, listing the increases and decreases year over year. And then the next page, 136, this begins each individual fund. So the first one is the Permanent Public Improvement Fund. This is known colloquial as the PPI Fund. I think the council is familiar. This is the $250 million infusion that went into the capital budget. And this is where we pay the debt service on those bonds. So these are separate from the county general obligation bonds, but they go into Board of Ed, transportation, and public safety projects. And you can see year over year, there's an increase as we are deploying more of these in the budget. The next page is Pay As You Go, also known as PayGo. This is simply where we contribute fund balance to the capital budget. And you might remember that last year we had a rather extraordinary year of about 205 million into the capital budget. This year, we're about half of that. So we're looking at 112 million of PayGo in the budget. That's still what I would consider an elevated amount. So we expect this to continue to decline from last year's high. But this is essentially cash that goes into the capital budget. Sometimes we're required to use that on things that don't have a life of asset that would be appropriate for bond funding. Other times we just use it to bolster the other funding sources in the budget to keep projects on track or allow us to move things up in the capital budget. The next page is tax increment districts. I know this is a topic of interest for several council members. So I think everybody knows what a TIF is, but it's basically just a way to generate revenue for future infrastructure projects using the increment in the tax assessments. So there's a table on the right of the budget page that just shows you all of our districts and what the movement is year over year. If you're not aware, once the infrastructure improvements are complete, the TIF continues to generate revenue, but then that just gets put into the general fund, just like any other property tax revenue would. There's a couple of things I did want to call to your attention in two specific districts. You'll see a decrease year over year for the parole district. And that's largely because there was a property tax appeal that changed the assessment there. And then you'll see the big movement in the Odenton Town Center. And that's because we are appropriating TIF funds to do the TOD garage, which is found in the capital budget. All the other districts, it's basically just incremental change year over year as assessments continue to go up incrementally. The next page, 139, this is special tax districts. Just keep in mind, these are different from the special community benefits districts, but these are specific districts that provide funding for public improvements through the issuance of bonds. So that means that there's an assessment of additional tax rate on those properties within that district. You can see that there are 4 such districts in the county, and the change year over year is just the incremental change from those assessments. Next page is debt service. That pretty much is what it says it is. This is where we pay the interest on the county's bonds. It goes up or down every year depending on how many bonds are being deployed at that given time. And you can see that table on the top right of the page. The next page is interesting. This is what we call mandated grants. So there's two main things here. The first involves the city of Annapolis, the city's share of the sales tax revenues, and there's also a share of the 911 trust fund. So that just gets consolidated in here. And then this is also where we house our annual appropriation for our share of the State Department of Assessments and Taxation. So you can see the increase in 24 is just attributable to that increase in the payment to SSTAT every year. Next page is our contribution to the parking garage fund. This is essentially Whitmore parking garage. So this is where we balance all that out. No change from last year. Next page, 143. This is the contribution to the installment purchase agreement. So this is essentially a account that helps purchase rural easements on farmland and open space. And so it moves up or down a little bit every year. This year, it's just down about $1,000. And then you'll see in a subsequent page, the balance sheet on that is the debt service. Next page is our self-insurance fund. So you can see on the right, the specific amounts listed for Board of Ed, Community College, Library Fund, Utilities, Solid Waste, and Child Care Fund. So these are all consolidated. And there's a decrease this year. That's largely because we're deploying some of the fund balance. We had an overly high fund balance in at the end of fiscal 22. So we're plugging that back in, which means our contribution in 23 can be less. So next page is the contribution to the rainy day fund. So this is an overall increase of $27.2 million, but about 2.6 million of that is assumed interest income. So we're actually looking at a 24.6 million appropriation into that fund, and that will bring us to the new limit of 8% of general fund operating revenues, and that total we estimate to be $159.2 million, which we believe is a very healthy and appropriate amount for a county of our size at this point. Next page is our contribution to the retiree health insurance, also known as OPEB. So there's a lot going on here this year. As we opened up on May 1st and explained, we are proposing to establish a Board of Education component to our OPEB fund for the first time. So that is a $19.2 million slug of funding that we've included in there. Now, this is made possible in part because we realized a significant amount of savings in our other OPEB fund contributions, and that is due to largely our Medicare costs going down. We got a new contractor this year, and I think we're getting more Medicare payments taken care of on the federal side. So that is a very good thing for the county. And because we were able to realize some savings on that side, and it was kind of designated OPEB money, we're now reinvesting that into OPEB by bringing in that Board of Ed retiree healthcare component. I'll pause there because it looks like Ms. Hummer may have a specific question to this, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Yep, Ms. Hummer, please.
So you say that this is a startup contribution for the Board of Ed retiree health benefits. What is the long-term, how much do we feel needs to be put in there to have it to be appropriate amount? And will this be a recurring line item in coming years? And what is the prediction that it will be in coming years? I know this is kind of a first time big lump sum, but.
Yes, great question. So what we will ultimately do is evaluation, and we'll have a specific number. So what we did in our office is we estimated using a number of assumptions based on our current OPEB with county employees, community college and libraries, and then the workforce that is, or the amount of retirees that are over in Board of Ed. So we feel that this is a pretty good estimate. But once this gets passed in the budget and included, we will then work with our Retiree Healthcare Benefits Trust, our Board of Trustees, and we will officially set up that OPEB for the Board of Ed. And then we will have that money as our first contribution. We will then work with our consultants to do a true valuation. We expect that the real amount will be a little bit more, a little bit less, but then that will be the incremental change year to year. So this is the big slug of getting it into the recurring basket. And then just like all of our OPEB and pension, we will do valuations and adjust year to year as necessary. But this is recurring funding, and the savings that we realized from our current OPEB valuation that made this possible is recurring as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so OPEB.
Real quick before you on the specific funds that you previously and this was particularly, let me scroll back up here, like the garage fund, debt services. Quick question: has the administration or you, have you had any discussions on P3s?
In specific, well, so the last term, the council passed a bill and the administration supported to encourage P3s. In the last year or two, the county has brought several P3s to bear, two in specific to Rec and Parks capital projects. Those unfortunately were not successful. But we continue to be interested in public-private partnerships where it makes sense for the county. And so we are certainly open to those concepts. These funds in particular are generally set up as special funds to meet specific county needs. Whether or not there is a potential to do more public-private partnership for the Whitmore Garage, for example, that would need to be a more involved conversation with central services. So I don't feel qualified, to answer specifics to that, but I can say that in general, the administration remains open and optimistic about the use of public-private partnerships going forward. But this county, traditionally looking backwards, hasn't been on the cutting edge of that. So we've got, I think, some catching up to do. But through the Odenton Garage and through some of the other development opportunities that we're working on and examples like that, I think that we're trying to become more adept at the P3 model.
Understood. And another reason it came up in my brain housing group was the 147 million in debt services that we're paying out of general fund, 78 million specifically on Board of Education. And so it was one of those things where, is there a way for us to maximize our ability to do those things, but not put more demands on the general fund dollars that we do have? So that's all. I just wanted to see if that was brought up here recently, but
sure.
That's it.
Okay, so we'll jump back in. There is a small annual contribution to the special fund for Arundel Community Development Services, or ACDS. So that's pretty much been constant at $270,000. Again, this is separate from our overall general contribution to ACDS, and they will be coming before you later today to discuss that. Okay, next page. This is what I mentioned a few minutes ago. This is the other side of the IPA, or installment purchase agreement. So this is the part that just pays the debt service on those existing IPAs that, as I mentioned before, fund those rural farmland and open space acquisitions. Getting close to the home stretch here. Video lottery impact aid. This is where we show the funds for the slot machine dollars. And if you look on the page 150, that gives you a breakdown of all of those. But generally, this is a year-over-year increase of $332,200 from last year. And then developer impact fees, you can see in the table, these are broken out. I know there was some discussion about impact fees during one of the capital budget reviews, but we have 7 different school districts. We have 6 different transportation districts. Just for fun, none of these match the council districts, even remotely. There's just all kinds of districts with all kinds of funding that don't align with the political boundaries. But we use these every year, and Naomi and in my office works closely with finance and planning and zoning to determine what is eligible, how much the balance are in these individual districts, and then we deploy those funds in the most optimal way to specific capital projects that are eligible. So this is a very time-intensive exercise that happens every year. And I know the auditor's office checks this as well, and they probably love it just as much as we do. But you can see the table is broken out there on the total appropriation authority for each district. I will mention that public safety impact fee is unique in that it is county-wide. It is not broken down by the district. And then finally, our last page is page 152, and this is the true Island of Misfit Toys. This is just reconciliation. We call contribution to other funds, where we reconcile all the money that's moved from one fund to another. This is where we show that in the book. So there's a listing of that on the budget page, and it just moves around every year depending on what's happening. So you can see the total budget for 24 is about $24.1 million. So that's finance non-departmental. Tons of fun. I know you wish I could go back and do it again, but that's it. And I will turn it back over to you guys.
All right. Any additional questions for the budget officer? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the Office of Finance. We will now switch over to Arundel Community Development Services. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Robbie, your hand just came up.
Sorry, I was really slow to find the hand thing again, especially because the way it was on my screen. Anyway, I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Trumbauer to bringing comedy to finance and budget and all aspects of it. Have a great day.
And Mr. Chair, you want to hear from the Office of Finance next. Mr. Trumbauer covered that. What did he call it? Misfit.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I got a little confused there with them bleeding over into finance. So yes, Office of Finance.
Good morning, Chairman Smith and members of the council. For the record, my name is Billy Penley. I'm the controller for the Office of Finance. I'm honored to be here before you this morning to share with our FY24 proposed budget. Like the budget office, I feel like probably we might be boring, but we are an important partner with you and other departments to keep the county running. We are the primary collector of, we are the collector of taxes, but we collect the taxes and we pay the bills and pay for capital projects and keep the lights on for all of us to continue helping the citizens of Anne Arundel County. Our budget book pages start on page 128. I do have a presentation here that I'd like to share with you just to give you some more background on what the Office of Finance does quietly behind the scenes. Next slide, please. So at a high level, we manage the finances. So we bill, we collect, and we report those finances. We submit, we have an audit done and submit the annual financial report to the administration and the public. All while we're trying to maintain the county's financial position and keep getting those AAA ratings. So I thank everybody here and our partners such as Economic Development that we did get the AAA rating, 3 of them. As stated in the county exec's budget message and the budget office message, we are one of 52 counties in the nation that received 3 AAA ratings. Next slide, please. The Office of Finance consists of 79 employees. We're divided into 2 bureaus. One bureau on the left-hand side to the middle of the slide is the accounting control. In accounting control, we have our accounts payable function, our investments, our grants management, where we track and report to make sure all the grants the departments receives are properly appropriated and spent. along with reporting of COVID and ARPA funds out there. Our financial reporting, we have the year-end closeout of the financials, prepare the financial statements, and participate in the annual audit. We also have capital projects, tax increment funds. Recently, you approved a reclass of a position for the ambulance fee administrator that we will be taking over the ambulance fee billing from the fire department shortly. We managed to administer the length of service award program for the volunteer firefighters. We have the bond sale, and we issue debt. For our billings and customer service, this is where we have our property tax billing, personal property, utility tax billing. We have the collections. We have 3 locations where we collect over the counter in person, one here at the Arundel Center, a location at the Reba Heritage Office Complex, and another location up in Glen Burnie, as well as online. We also do the sales and use tax, and we have tax sales for those accounts that become delinquent, and per the requirements of code, we go through the annual tax sale process. This year's tax sale is scheduled for June 6th, and it's all conducted online. Back in the day, we had an auctioneer come in and operate an auction from the county council, but over the years, we have migrated to being online. Next slide, please. This is summarizing what I shared with you before for the accounting control division. So, primarily, we report the financials, we pay vendors, employee expenses, we have conducted the bond sale, we do the rating agency presentation with the team, and we also manage the county's pension and other post-employment benefit trust funds. Next slide, please. Billings and customer service. So just to give you a picture of what we do. So for utility billing accounts, we bill 140,000 utility bills a year. We bill 220,000 property tax bills a year. And accordingly, for those that are delinquent, we have the tax sales. Also in property taxes, we administer the 19 property tax credits that we have in county code. Back in, for 2023, we granted 1,740 property tax credits in the amount of $4.3 million. We have our cashier locations, online processes there, our customer service where we handle calls to help the citizens, the customers of Anne Arundel counties, and sometimes they call in for other aspects, and we work with the Department of Aging to help folks that are in need, referring them to the social services, relief programs. We also work with members of the county council to assist constituents there. In our customer service, we process deeds and leads and have a lot of communications with title and mortgage companies, along with recordation and transfer tax section here. Next slide, please. Just to expand on what I've already shared, their customer service division, they're the ones that are on the front line for our team. We do, from time to time, receive calls or emails from customers thanking for our help or thanking for getting their bill, but most times not. Those folks have a hard job in customer service. So last year, they handled 77,000 phone calls, 19,000 emails, processed 50,000 deeds, and had 1,600 walk-in customers. Recordation and transfer tax, they handled over 69,000 instruments out there. Accounts payable, we cut 22,000 paper checks, processed 5,500 electronic payments, and 9,300 invoices. And cashiers, we had 145,000 transactions that came across our counter at one of our 3 locations. We also have the lockbox where customers can mail their payments in. That processed 210,000. Last fall, we went live with an improved online payment system, which included auto pay. So since September last year, 6,960 accounts have set up to participate in the auto pay program. Also, we improved our pay by phone program that it's no longer a live operator, it's automated, so the folks don't have to get in queue. They just immediately go in, punch in their information, and they can pay their bills. Next slide, please. Sharing our accomplishments, some of them clean audits for our FY22 financials and a retiree and health benefits trust fund. As stated before, we implemented an improved online payment system. And also we continue to satisfy the federal reporting requirements for our ARPA funding. And then on our website, we're continually trying to improve that, to put more and more information that's useful to folks on the website. So constantly updating it with what's coming up next, whether it's delinquent bills, tax sale notices, annual billing. But also we expanded our contact information for property taxes. Not only is there a phone number, but also a email, and all staff in that section monitor it. So it's just not going into one person's voicemail or email and might sit there if they happen to be off, but also the callers get direct assistance that way, and takes them out of the customer service wait queue time to go directly to receive assistance. Next slide, please. Here is a high-level overview of our budget. So the Office of Finance's budget is 7.66% more than FY23. Changes primarily include, for this increase, and I'll go into more details, is our contractual charges for the ambulance fee collection service. The vendor collects on behalf of the county those fees, and what we have to pay them is 4.25% for non-Medicaid billings and 10% collection fee for Medicaid billings. Also included in the increase is postage. In FY23, there was 2 rates in postage that we have built into this request, and also employee pay packages. Next slide, please. This is the Accounting and Control Bureau, the one that does the accounts payable, financial reporting, bond sales, investments, OPEB, links of service awards here. This budget, the increases are primarily related to personnel. There is a new position, a financial clerk 2, to support the ambulance billing program and also support the functions of this section here. We also have one-time support in the amount of $59,000 to help us with our year-end processes and preparing the financial statements and implementing another governmental accounting standard board's pronouncement. We've also are upgrading, reclassifying some positions to meet the needs better of the sections. We're trying to improve processes. One of the areas is in accounts payable. The federal government has really gotten restrictive and following up on folks' W-9s and 1099s. And if the county does not have the proper entity reported on the 1099, there's a fine for each account to the county. So this position that we're upgrading from an office support assistant 2 to a financial clerk 2 will be handling that process to make sure that good data is being entered, maintaining it, working with the vendors on that, and also logging into a IRS website to double check. Quite often vendors put their doing business as name on their W-9s and it doesn't match their tax returns, and that's where the problem is occurring. So we're trying to eliminate all future fines in that area. Next slide, please. Billings and customer service. This is the bigger section of the two. We do all the billings here. We have a new position in our sales and use tax area. Bill number 8819 added the second 7% occupant tax for the short-term rentals and hotel platforms. So we went from processing approximately 100 sales and use tax accounts a month to 300. So it's an involved process going through the returns back and forth with the owners, submitting them, submitting our reports to the state, et cetera. So we have expanded that area and need the extra help to timely go through those returns and report and receive the funds into the county there. We have found that this position is supported and justified by the revenue that's coming in associated with the short-term rentals and hotel platforms. When we first started collecting for them in 2020, we collected $9,000. In FY22, we collected over $1 million for that area. So this is definitely a revenue generating position there. We're also reclassing some positions as our cashier 1 that we're reclassing to an accountant 1. Over time, the walk-in customer traffic to cashiers has gone down, and technology has increased on the backside with the online payment process, importing, reconciling. Quite often folks don't put in the right account number, et cetera. So we have to trace that down, working with chargebacks, return checks, et cetera. So we need more help on the back end than the front end of the process in our cashier section there. We're also reclassing 2 other positions that are currently filled. One is a financial clerk 1 to a financial clerk 2 in our recordation and transfer tax. Position is doing job duties that align with the financial clerk 2 job. And then in utility billing, a office support assistant 2 to a financial clerk 1, also doing duties of a financial clerk 1 position there. With that said, that is the Office of Finance. I am here to answer any questions you may have. We thank you for listening. Always here to help with any questions you may have from your constituents.
I would say you're probably one of the few offices that never really get remarks from, at least from District 1, certainly, when it comes to Office of Finance. So I'm glad you do what you do, and it obviously keeps the trains running and the lights on. So love it. Any comments from any of the other council members?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Volke, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Penley, good morning. Thank you for
Morning.
being here. So just wanted to make sure I heard a couple things correctly. You indicated, I think, that the Airbnb revenues that you are collecting, the 7% charge, are now just from the Airbnbs generating $1 million a year. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And I had another question for you, and I don't know if you know the answer to this offhand or if you have to look into it, but is there a way, because you all do collect the property taxes, that you could tell us sort of property taxes by district, like how much you're collecting? Is that something you're able to give us information on?
Yes.
By council?
So, by council district, I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that, definitely by the tax districts, but I will look in that and get back to you. And this would be for FY23, correct?
Yes. Yep. For looking at last year. And then I don't know whether you have this capability or not. I know this is something I've spoken, I don't want to take the wind out of her sails, but Ms. Ledbetter and I have discussed this as well as Ms. Fiedler. Are you able to see income tax by district? Is that something that the Office of Finance is able to parse that information out, where we can see how much each council district is paying with respect to income tax, so that we can get a sense for what any of these income tax increases would be on our respective districts?
I will have to look into that
Okay.
and to determine if I can provide that information.
Okay, if you could, that would be very helpful. I'll I see Ms. Fiedler waiting, so I'll come back.
Mr. Chair, are you good if I go?
No, please.
Okay.
And just FYI, for some reason, I'm not seeing, oh, there it is. Okay, now it's coming back up. All right, Ms. Fiedler, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Volke. I appreciate that. I have a quick question regarding the new online payment system. I've gotten some questions on the fees, the processing fees associated with the online payment system. I assume that that is because there's a third-party vendor involved. Is that correct?
That is correct. And by county code, the county is not permitted to absorb those fees.
Okay, so in order for us to do away with those fees, we would have to create our own online payment system, which I would imagine is a pretty big lift, but I'm not an IT person, so.
I mean, there's the systematic part of it, but then, you know, there's the collection, the financial institution part of it too. So
Right.
I'm not aware of any other counties that do that in-house, but definitely something we can look into, survey other jurisdictions to see what they do.
That's great. Not super urgent. Just wanted to confirm that that's the reason for the fee. So I appreciate that.
And I see Ms. Ledbetter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to follow up on an alternative to the request that Mr. Volkes made about the taxes by both property and income by councilmatic district. If it's not broken down at that, perhaps by zip code, that maybe might be an easier piece of data to pull. So just was gonna throw that out there as a suggestion. And if I may, Mr. Chair, I have a completely unrelated comment more than a question.
No, please.
Thank you. I have heard from a couple constituents that, and this is just constructive feedback for you to tuck away, is that it was not intuitive where to sign up on the auto pay on the website. They expected to see it on the page where when you log in and you actually are paying your bill. They were expecting to see it on that payment option where I think it says pay now. They were also expecting to see it like or sign up for auto withdrawal in the future. It's in a different section. And so I just wanted to relay that perhaps a little bit more intuitive, maybe more people would sign up and you'd get your money faster. So for what it's worth.
No, I appreciate that because it's the vendor, the county uses Pay Fitness, and it's on their site that folks sign up and enroll and do that. But I appreciate it, and I will, take a look at the website again to see how we can make it more user friendly for folks.
Awesome, thank you. That is it.
And then I see Steve, what's your hand up?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to try to answer the income tax question. So I used to work at the state comptroller's office, and I did work on the estimate for the upcoming budget for the income tax. The data that's reported from the state, as they're the administrators of our local income tax, comes back at the county level. So we don't at least get any other detail at the zip code or councilman district level. So it could be a data request that we get from the comptroller's office, but at this time we don't have any of that data available.
Ms. Ledbetter, does that, Mr. Volkey?
Thank you. Yeah, if you can make that request, that'd be fantastic. That would be very helpful. Can I, Mr. Chair, just a moment of personal privilege, I guess is what we call it. But I just wanted to say to Ms. Penley, so someone reached out to me and shared with me that your father, who is a longtime Anne Arundel County public servant, police officer, volunteer firefighter, that he passed over the weekend. So I just wanted to share with you the condolences on behalf of the council, myself. Just thank you for all of his service to the county and the fact that you've continued to carry on that legacy in an extremely strong way, and just wanted to share that with you. So I wanted to wait until the end because I didn't want to say that to you and then have to ask you a whole bunch of questions afterward.
Well, thank you for the kind words, much appreciated. He was a rock, he touched many lives, and he made me the person I am. And he always said, take care of your job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good comment, Mr. Volkey. Any additional, well, with that being said, I don't want to, I think we'll end right there. And certainly, Ms. Penley, thank you for your service and the fact that you're here today, still going through the budget.
Thank you.
Now, okay. And now I think what we'll do is we'll transition over to Arundel Community Development Services. And I think I'll turn it over to Sam, if you wanted to kick that off.
Yep, that's me. I was waiting for Erin Karpowitz to be let in. I'm not sure if she's in the waiting room. Oh, there she is.
There's a couple of
Okay.
actually, so I'm just letting all three errands in.
Okay. I'm not sure what she's doing over there.
I'm here.
Hi, Erin. Okay, so I just want to direct you guys, Sam Chiriaco for the record, Budget Office, page 109 of the proposed budget book. And I believe we have a presentation, Laura, for you to pull up if you can. Aaron, I'll pass it over to you.
Great, thanks. Hi, thanks, Sam. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the council. It's great to be here with you this morning. I'm Erin Karpowitz. I'm the CEO of Arundel Community Development Services. And with me, I think it says Erin Karpowitz on the phone on the Zoom call, but I really have Beth Brush, my planning director, and James Sylvester, my chief operating officer. If you want to go ahead and go to the next slide on the presentation. Thank you. ACDS is Arundel Community Development Services. We're a private nonprofit organization that was established by the county back in 1993, 30 years ago, to create housing and community development opportunities in the county, especially working in low and moderate income communities. So we are a private nonprofit, but we contract with the county. We act very much as a county agency. We are a seasoned administrator of both county, state, and federal funds. We're good stewards of government funding, but we're also an innovator that figures out kind of what the needs are, especially for our low and moderate income communities. And we develop programs and develop partnerships to fill those needs. So one thing that we do is we act as the planner. We plan where we head the county's continuum of care to end homelessness. We do the county's 5-year plan, consolidated plan that we submit to HUD. We do a lot of community planning and engagement. And then we also administer a lot of different grants on behalf of the county, whether they're CARES Act grants, ARPA grants, community support grants, video lottery terminal grants, some of the grants through our federal programs. We administer probably over 120 subrecipient grants. Now that did increase a lot in recent years with COVID, and we were able to really leverage our expertise in administering federal funds to administer a large portion of the county's funding and CARES Act funding and ARPA funding and some county general funding to a lot of nonprofits, not just ones working in the housing realm, but also community development. We did grants to groups that were providing remote learning during school, remote schooling. And we also did a lot of work on the emergency food assistance front, administering funds to the Anne Arundel County Food Bank and a lot of over 13 different community partners. So that's one side of us kind of as administrators. And then we also provide direct services and direct programming. We provide first-time home buyer counseling to over 400 families a year, and also some direct home buyer assistance, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Foreclosure prevention assistance, last year we served 67 households to help them prevent losing their homes. We administer weatherization and energy efficiency programs. Again, we coordinate strategies to end homelessness. We stood up the state's first eviction prevention program in response to COVID, and I'll talk about that later. As I said, we do a lot of community grant making. We do property rehabilitation. We help low-income homeowners stabilize their houses and correct them for safety and code violations. I'm really proud of our team because in the last year, we've really ramped that program back up. During COVID, there was a bit of a lag. People didn't want you coming into their house to do construction, and it was hard to get contractors, but we've gotten that back to we're on track to complete 30 homes this year we provide the financial assistance as well as technical assistance. We also make accessibility modifications as part of that programming. And then we also create and preserve affordable housing opportunities. And we do a lot of that. Some of it we actually do in-house. We serve as a small developer. We own a number of scattered site affordable rental units. And we've also developed some new and some rehabilitated units for sale for home ownership. And then we also make loans to nonprofit and for-profit affordable housing developers. and make grants and loans to nonprofit affordable housing providers. Oh, and one thing I want to mention back under property rehabilitation, we also, not only do we partner with low-income homeowners, also nonprofit providers to provide property rehab. The picture on the bottom is a project I'm really excited about. We partnered with Langton Green and supported them with not only construction technical assistance, but also a combination of federal community development block grant and county loans. And we're renovating their 59 individual there are 59 residential units that serve individuals with developmental disabilities. So really excited about that. We should be having a grand reopening sometime this summer or early fall. If you could go to the next slide, I'm now going to, if you want to follow along in your budget book, it's page 109 in your budget book, and I'm going to kind of go through where we are in the budget. And actually, this is a little bit out of order of how it's listed. I'm going to go first to the Community Development Fund. This Community Development Fund consists of mainly entitlement programs from the federal government. And so that's our community development block grant funding, which provides a lot of capital funding, and a little bit, just only 15% of that funding can be used to support operating programs from some of our public service subrecipients. But we use that funding. Again, I was able to use it to rehab some of the units at Langton Green's project. We can do community facilities and low and moderate income communities like the Severn Center that is being built, is almost built, will be built Saturday in the Severn area. And then also, like I said, small grants to public service providers. So especially groups that are supporting affordable housing. We have grants out to groups like Partners in Care, the Boys and Girls Club, and many others. Emergency Solutions Grant, that's an entitlement grant. It's kind of by formula, although we do have to do a lot of application and planning work to get that. That is direct funding to support our homeless shelters in the county, Sarah's House, and the Lighthouse Shelter, as well as a little bit of funding for Arundel House of Hope. Our Home Investment Partnership Program, that's also a federal entitlement program that helps us mainly, it's all supposed to be utilized for affordable housing. The $270,000 county contribution that Mr. Trumbauer mentioned earlier, that actually is, that helps us fulfill our required county match for this home program. And so those funds collectively all go to support building housing and providing demand side subsidies for households that are earning 80% of area median income and below. Continuum of Care, that's a federal competitive grant process, and we apply for that on behalf of many partner agencies and nonprofits in the county, and that's to prevent homelessness as well as serve people, families, and individuals who are experiencing homelessness. And finally, our Housing Opportunities for Persons with HIV/AIDS program, that's an entitlement grant that goes to Baltimore City for the whole region, and then we get a portion of that, and that has to be specifically used for housing vouchers for households that are living with HIV and AIDS. And then if you go to the next slide, this is the county general fund. And this fund is reduced a little bit this year. And part of that's because some of that's being supplanted by the proposed affordable housing trust fund. So I'll talk about that in a moment. But what's still in the budget under county general funds includes our housing counseling programs. I mentioned that already. We counsel over 400 families each year, as well as provide foreclosure prevention counseling. The picture up here is from our recent home ownership fair. Great turnout at Van Bachlen Elementary. We had over 60 people register for this first-time homebuyer class. All of our home ownership classes are free and open to every resident in the county, regardless of their income. It's targeted to first-time home buyers, but if anyone needs a refresher course, they're welcome to come in. Similarly, our foreclosure prevention counseling is available to any household, regardless of income. Also, this includes general support. get any other direct operating support from the county. So just, and this hasn't gone up, it's level funded. And then also support for our housing and community development partners. So there are some subrecipient grants in there. One is for the Housing Commission to support their family self-sufficiency program. And then the other one is for the Greater Baybrook Alliance, which is a community development corporation working up in the Brooklyn Park area. And they do a lot of business development as well as revitalization work. And then, I'm sorry, the third one is for our partners at the Mental Health Agency to provide support for clients who are experiencing homelessness through a number of partners. And then finally, the Community Support Grant Program, and actually that's highlighted because I have a little bit more detail on that on a slide. If you move to the next slide, please. Thank you. This is a community support grant program that we administer on behalf of the County Executive's Office. And we, each year we take applications, and this year, gosh, it keeps getting more and more competitive. We received over, let's see, I guess actually we received exactly 150 applications, totaling over $7.5 million in funding requests. We the county executive has included $2 million in the budget under our budget request. And we're recommending 69 grants. And you can kind of see the breakdown there. The pictures that I have up there, that's just the Boys and Girls Club kids. I think that's at their current Mead Village Club. And then also some families that were assisted by Hope for All, which is a program that provides bedding, furniture, and other household necessities to families who are transitioning out of homelessness. So this group of awards is great. It really runs the gamut of community development awards that are really focused on helping underserved communities, promoting equity and inclusiveness, also addressing health and well-being, and including behavioral and mental health, and eliminating the opportunity gap. If you go to the next slide, please. I will finish by talking about the Housing Trust Fund. What we're proposing is a housing trust fund that is expected to generate about $7.5 million in revenue in the next year. And the types of activities that funding would support are all direct affordable housing programs. We know that housing, there continues to be a huge need for housing in the county. Affordable home ownership is very difficult for folks to attain. The median sales price, depending on what month you look at in recent months, has been above $437,000 on the median sales price, and incomes have not kept pace with that. So it's very difficult for our first-time home buyers to be able to afford to buy a home. And we have recently announced, and we were able to utilize funds from the Housing Trust Fund that was appropriated from general funds last year. We were able to utilize funds from that to increase the amount of funding that we're providing to moderate income home buyers, and also increase the income limit so we can help more first-time home buyers. The other piece under home ownership initiatives that we want to do is be able to act again as a developer to create new affordable home ownership units. We have a project in the pipeline that would create 10 new units for sale to low and moderate income. And then we've also got a program in the pipeline, if this gets funded, where we can go out and acquire and rehabilitate existing units to be sold to low and moderate income home buyers at affordable prices. So there needs to be some subsidy on that side. The next category of expenditures would be affordable rental housing development and preservation. I've got a lot of projects in the pipeline right now, totaling over $9.1 million that are trying to get to the finish line. Some of them have gaps, and we're planning to use some of the existing appropriation to fund those. But then I've also got additional affordable rental projects coming in and applying through our pre-application process that we've announced, and they need additional funding. a lot of our developers go through the state of Maryland and compete for very competitive 9% tax credits. And so typically we would see one development every couple years come through that are getting those. And so by utilizing an affordable housing trust fund, having a permanent financing mechanism, we will be able to help create and provide, help spur the supply of affordable units for developments that are coming in that may not get those competitive tax credits. They may be getting the 4% tax credits from the state of Maryland, which are not as competitive, but they require a higher soft subsidy. So this funding will allow us to come in and do that. And this funding, when we provide it as a soft loan to developments, it is a loan and we do charge interest typically, and those loan funds are repaid and go back into the pot in order to create additional funding. So in addition to creating new units, also creating, preserving existing units is really important, especially as we see coming down the pipeline, a lot of the units that have been created in the last 40 years, they're coming up against their affordability period that is required. And so they're at risk of being lost to the private market. The next, and I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you my statistics on affordable rental development. I think everybody's heard it and read it in the paper, so I won't go into it, but I do have a lot of updates. And one thing I want to point out is that I think some of you are familiar with the housing needs assessment that we conducted back in 2019, which indicated at the time, I think it indicated that we had a shortage of about 10,000 units for households that are earning 60% of area median income and below. We had it updated, and it's not surprising that that number hasn't shrunk. It's actually grown. So households are making 60% of area median income today. There's a shortage of about 12,300 units for those households. So we are, we're racing against time to create additional units that our workforce can afford. Under eviction prevention, I wanted to share, as I mentioned earlier, we did stand up the state's first eviction prevention in response to COVID. I'm really proud of that program. We've been able to serve, along with many county partners, we've been able to serve about 5,000 households in the last 2.5, 3 years. And that funding is going down. Not only did we provide eviction prevention, we also provided some tenant-based rental, like short-term tenant-based rental assistance. And if you look, I added up all of our COVID-related funds that went specifically for eviction prevention and kind of the short-term rapid rehousing and other related housing programs. Over the last 3 years, we have been awarded and administered about $61 million. And so all of that funding is going away. And so this trust fund, again, the main focus is going to be focused on creating supply, but some of it will help us kind of avoid that fiscal cliff, or at least help soften the blow. Again, because that was about, if you average that out, that's about $20 million a year in the last 3 years that we've been spending on programs that either prevent people from being evicted or help them quickly get rehoused if they've been facing homelessness. Next, tenant-based rental assistance. This is one of the programs that was supplanted from our general fund revenue budget. And this is a program I'm really excited. The main part of this program will be the moving home program. It's a program I'm really excited about. It helps people, families, and individuals who have been experiencing homelessness get rehoused, get some tenant-based rental assistance while they get back on their feet, get linked up with employment or resources to help them get higher employment and increase their incomes. And the idea is that they're on it for a year. A lot of these families that we're working with, they have a lot of credit and credit issues or other issues that a typical landlord doesn't always want to see. And so we have a housing relocation specialist who has a great relationship with landlords throughout the county. She works with them. We provide some support to the landlords and get these individuals housed. And then hopefully they make it off and make it on their own, or we're able to help them transition to another situation. And finally, this revenue source, this permanent revenue source, would allow us to help some of our nonprofit partners who would like to develop transitional housing or next step housing, but they don't have the operating funds to do that. HUD, a while back, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development stopped funding transitional housing and really is focused on more permanent supportive housing, which of course is our goal. But we know, and our partners know, we've talked to providers, we've talked to the YWCA, the Lighthouse, Sarah's House. Not everybody is ready to move into a permanent supportive housing situation. And having some operating support for next step housing is a really good thing. So that was a mouthful. I'm going to end there, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, I see Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate that presentation. You're not busy at all, are you? So I just have a quick question regarding the Housing Trust Fund. Of the proposed 16.8 million in the budget, how much of that is specifically going to eviction prevention? I know that everything helps in that category, but what's specifically going to those immediate needs?
Sure. And so I will say, I think the federal funding that we have been receiving on behalf of the county, as well as some direct awards directly from the state of Maryland to ACDS, we do have a little bit of that funding left that will carry over into next fiscal year. And we're projecting that. So sorry, I should have backed up and shared this. What we've done is we've really, we had a lot of federal funding and there were a lot of federal expenditure deadlines, and we had to spend that money very quickly. We've since then really restricted the program, knowing that we were facing, declining funding. And so we've restricted the flow of that funding. We've restricted the eligibility criteria. So we're spending about half of what we were last year at this time. And because of that, we have enough that will last us through October. What my budget is showing right now is that we plan to spend about 3 million of that 16 million for eviction prevention. And I want our focus to be on rental housing production, not eviction prevention. But I think for the time being, we do need to invest those resources.
Great, thank you.
All right, Ms. Rodvian.
Thank you. I also will just say thank you. It does sound like you're keeping very busy, and I know you've got a lot of really important work going on, and thank you. So thank you to you and everyone at ACDS for doing that. I have a couple questions, but the first one is, what do you see as the biggest obstacle to homeownership? Is it credit approval, getting the funds for a down payment, or is it like the actual mortgage cost itself, or something else that I'm not, suggesting here?
Mm-hmm. I think it's all of the above. And I think it really depends on the client. I think when you're working with, so before we were able to use the housing trust funds to kind of raise the income limits, we were working with federal funds, which restrict access to households earning 80% of area median income. And that's a pretty low income to be able to afford a house in this county. So just to give you an example, like say we were working with a single individual, that would be $62,000 for a household size of one, making $62,000. So we were able to raise it to 100%. So that would be an individual making $78,000 a year. So that income gives them more affordability to afford a mortgage, and especially now with rising interest rates, that's really critical. And so it's kind of like we're facing an uphill battle. Even though the market's starting to cool, inventory is still very low and housing prices haven't tanked enough to offset the increase in mortgage rates. But we'll see what happens in the next year or so. I think that this bump is really going to help, and it's going to expand our pool of people who can get in and afford. Credit issues are very, very critical. I think, you know, we have people that come in all the time that have credit issues, and that's why our program's really, I think, amazing, because we don't just do, like you saw that classroom situation on my photo, that's just the first step. We have a classroom where people come and learn about the process and the basics, but then we have individual counselors that work with people one-on-one to work through their credit issues. And then the lack of down payment is definitely an issue, especially as people are coming out of college and have debt, or maybe they have other debt. And we do work with them to be able to access some of the state of Maryland programs, like their Maryland mortgage program, which has slightly lower interest rates. And then it also, it's Maryland Smart Buy, which provides some loan forgiveness to people who are kind of carrying that debt. So it helps them with their mortgage affordability.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, do you mind if I ask one more question?
No, please go for it.
Thank you. This is really just for informational purposes because, you know, obviously this is I think it's a big topic across the county, as you just mentioned, but it comes up very frequently in, you know, in District 6. And I have had a lot of discussions with constituents about what is considered a middle class, like what would the cost be for a middle class single family home? And they suggested, you know, a neighborhood where homes were in the 400 to 600,000 range would be considered middle class. And I just thought that sounds totally not middle class to me. And so I was curious if there's any actual definition, or, I mean, obviously there's so many factors, you know, cost is just, you know, the price tag on a house is just one factor. Like you mentioned, the interest rates, do they have to pay points, you know, all those different kinds of things, or is there, you know, if it's a condo, are there association fees and things like that? But is there something that, you know, a ballpark range that is considered middle class housing?
Well, sure. I can give you an example. So, for example, because of the housing trust funds, we were able to increase the income limits to serve households making 100% of area median income and below. And I will just specify, this is kind of wonky, but it's for the Baltimore metropolitan region, because we have to use HUD income, and that's what they have us use, is for the whole Baltimore metropolitan area. So this isn't necessarily the Anne Arundel median income, but for a family of 3, that would be $100,000 a year. So that would be the median household income. And so a family earning about $100,000 a year could, again, just as I'm making a lot of assumptions here, but assuming current interest rates, assuming some typical debt, they could expect to afford a house in like around $350,000. And, you know, we know, again, that it's hard to find those houses. It's a very low inventory. And then the houses that you do find in that range or lower, they need a lot of corrections to their safety and health code violations. They need a lot of work. And so that's why I think creating a program where we can go out and rehabilitate the homes and bring them up to current standards, that will really help get people into a sustainable, affordable homeownership situation.
Thank you so much for answering that question. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Aaron, yesterday you received the community award, the Janet Owens Community Award. So thank you for really putting community within Arundel Community Development Corporation. So I wanted to recognize that you've been doing this for a while now. Obviously, Kathy Koch before you, and you've taken that torch and sort of run with it. You know, this is one of those catch-all organizations to some extent. You have obviously economic development folks, you have workforce development, but community development is such a broad term, right? It's everything. Those other two, it could impact those other two categories as well. So your organization, how many people do you have on staff? I mean, I know it's in the book, but I'm just sort of?
Yeah, we currently have 41 people on staff. We have a couple job openings, so.
And what is that? What is that vacancy?
We have an opening for an affordable housing underwriter and for a community development planner.
Okay. All right. And the reason I even stress that is because ACDS, because you do so many other things. I mean, I'm a fan of the work that you do, especially in Brooklyn Park. I've seen those houses that have had the frontage redone, for example, and it certainly looks more appealing for the folks that are living there. And I know that the sort of businesses and other entities that are up in those areas that are benefiting from this are excited and ecstatic to receive those grants and opportunities. So thank you for doing that. I did see Ms. Ledbetter hand come up first, so over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a follow-up question, and you referenced it. I just want to make sure my understanding is crystal clear. The direct funding revenue for the Housing Trust Fund that's proposed is the increase in the transfer tax. Am I coming to the correct conclusion, or please correct me if I'm wrong?
Yes, ma'am. It would be a 0.5% increase on the county portion of the transfer tax, only on real estate valued at $1 million or more.
Perfect. Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it.
And over to Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Ms. Karpowitz. I have to first thank you, as I did with the Health Department, your entire staff for your incredible work over the last 2 to 3 years. You really have been amazing. So thank you. I also wanted to comment, ask some questions, if you could. The calculation you just did regarding what would be considered a middle class house price of $350. When you do that, I know this is sort of back of the napkin calculation, but are you considering student loan debt or childcare on top of those with that $100,000 income? So that's a question I wanted to ask. And then the other thing I just wanted to comment to my colleagues is housing affordability is a massive issue sweeping the country. It is not just a local issue in Anne Arundel County. And I would really, especially all of our council members, to stay abreast of everything that ACDS and our Housing Commission and our local association of realtors. There's a lot of data available out there, and there's a lot, you can't open the paper. There's something about housing affordability or the housing crisis every day in the press. We don't speak about it every day on the council. So it is something that local policymaking has a huge hand in. So I would it's just sort of a plea to my colleagues to educate yourself on the issues and ways where we can interject ourselves, because a stable house and stable housing is fundamental to thriving communities. But I wanted, if Aaron, if you could give a little bit of the statistics of the housing needs assessment and then break down those calculations a little more clearly, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah. So I think, yeah, and thank you for the opportunity to dive a little deeper. So as I said, in 2019, there were about 61% of our 52% of our households that are making 60% of the area median income were unserved by affordable housing. So that there was a gap of units then. We had about 10,000, we were 10,000 units short of units that were priced at an affordable price that those renter households earning 60% could afford. And then in 2022, 61% of our households making 60% AMI were unserved. And so they were that was an increase of about 2,300 households that were unserved. And I can follow up and get you this data in writing so that you don't have to, sometimes it's hard to track that when someone's verbalizing it. But a couple other statistics, of all renters in the county, regardless of income, 45% of our renter households are cost burdened, meaning that they pay more than 30% of their income for housing. And then 19% of our renters are severely cost burdened. And that means they pay more than 50% of their income for housing. So that's income that can't go to childcare. That's income that can't go to groceries or gas or other necessities. And then also, I think it's important to share that between 2019 and the end of 2022, when our update was conducted, rents for the surveyed apartments, and our consultant surveyed over 71% of all rental units in the county. They actually reached out and called the apartment communities. We had an increase of 5.7% in rent payments or rent cost each year. So that was compounded each year, so that a typical rental unit in 2019 might have cost $1,500. It was costing close to $1,900 by the end of 2022. So again, just crazy price increases. And then the median home price in 2017 was $324,000. That was the median sales price. And that rose to $438,000 by the end of 2022. So that rose by 35%. Incomes over the same period only increased 17%. So incomes aren't keeping up with home sales prices. So I probably have more data than you want to hear, but as Councilwoman Pickard noted, this is definitely a regional, a statewide, and a nationwide crisis. There's a huge shortage of affordable rental units throughout the state. Maryland DHCD recently did a study on that. And, just increasing supply side production is really important, and as well as helping some of our renters and homeowners with demand side subsidies. And then to your question about what goes into that calculation, that the calculation on what a household can afford at 100% AMI, that takes in some assumptions of some typical debt. I don't have that off the top of my head, but I can follow up and get that to you, what we put into that specific calculation. But typically it's based on that they're going to pay 30% of their income on rent. So childcare costs and other costs would be outside of that 30%. Is that?
Thank you. That's very helpful. If I may, Mr. Chair, I'll wind it up here. Yes, housing is one of my passions. So as we look at the data that Ms. Karpowitz has presented, whether it's median incomes or 100% or 80% or 60%, and then we stretch it across to housing prices in the county, it's also important to really take a look at where our workforce is and where our workforce wages are, whether it's our hospitals or our airports or our schools or our public safety or even our county workforce, and draw those incomes out. And you'll come to the conclusion that Anne Arundel County is not affordable for the majority of our workforce, and it is playing a role in some of our highest vacancies for workers. So it has a ripple effect. The housing affordability crisis, both locally and nationally, has a ripple effect into everything that it touches, every aspect of a family's life and a community's life, economically, health-wise. So I really, as we work together over the next few years, I hope we can keep in mind the realities on the ground and how we want to all have thriving communities and healthy families and a healthy workforce. So get to know what's happening at ACDS, get to know what's happening. We'll hear from workforce development soon and economic development soon, but housing is a huge, huge issue. And I'm happy to be a resource for anybody who wants to learn more about it. but really there are other experts out there. So I'm just going to get off my soapbox, but we have a lot of work to do in this county to make sure that we have thriving communities and families. Thank you, ACDS. Y'all are amazing.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Volkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Karpowitz, good morning. I think we're still morning. Yep. So quick question for you. Hearing the affordability concerns that you've noted and the challenges with respect to housing, has there been any study or any review on what happens when property taxes are raised and how, if at all, that cost is then passed on to renters, thereby increasing rental prices? Is there any literature, any review on that? I'm just asking because as a landlord in the county myself, and as somebody who, you know, if my taxes go up, you want to see your margins sort of stay the same. Oftentimes that can be a factor in how rents are set. So I just didn't know if that was something that you all factor in.
That's not something that my agency has looked at recently, but I can certainly check with my housing policy person and get back to you.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd appreciate it. I'd just be curious sort of the interplay between those two things, because obviously different things have different actions and reactions, and I'd be curious to know how that plays out. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Ravian.
Thank you. I just thought I'd comment, on that topic, the property increases, the property tax increases that are proposed, for if we go with that median home price of $420,000, actually turn out to be about $15 a month, $15, $20 a month, somewhere in that ballpark. And that is not remotely near the rent increases that we've seen across the county. So I know that's not exactly the detail you're looking for, but the supply and demand, I think, is a much stronger pull than than what we see from very modest property tax increases.
All right. Any additional questions on ACDS, for CDS? All right, Ms. Karpowitz, thank you for the brief, and we look forward to working with you here in the near future. At this time, did you have any parting remarks? Okay.
Thank you.
So at this time, we will now switch over to Anne Arundel Workforce Development. And Sam, I will transition back to you.
Yes, me again. Thank you. Sam Chiriaco, Budget Office. The Workforce Development Corporation's budget is on page 110 of your budget book for reference. And I will pass it over to Kirkland when he gets online here.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity for us to present. I have with me Chuck Knapp, our Director of Finance.
Good morning.
So real quick, again, thank you very much for the opportunity to present our budget to you. As you know, Anne Arundel Workforce Development Corporation, we are charged with overseeing the workforce development program as cited in the county code. We work with both residents and businesses to ensure that Anne Arundel County has a skilled and available workforce to meet the needs of the businesses here in Anne Arundel County. This year, our budget request is for $550,950. This is a slight increase from last year. Part of this is due to increased costs and staffing and adding to adjust staffing increase due to inflation, full increases into our budget. There's a slight increase in other costs. One of the things that we use our county funds to do is to cover some of the costs of our Career Center up in Lithicum Heights. We have several partners that are county agencies that we cover their costs in that facility. So it's to cover that cost. But that's really about our budget. Our budget is the county budget is about 2% of our overall budget, but is a very important part of our budget. It is what allows us to make sure that we're being quickly responding to the workforce development needs of the citizens and businesses of Anne Arundel County. Our budget covers things like our Director of Strategic Initiatives, which has been a very valuable position to make sure that we're being responsive. It's also one of the things under her portfolio is grant development. Over the last 10 years, we've brought in over $60 million in additional competitive grants into Anne Arundel County to make sure that we are meeting the workforce needs of both the businesses and residents of Anne Arundel County. With that said, I'll stop and answer any questions that you may have for me.
Any additional questions from any of the council members? And how many vacancies do you have in your department as well? Just curious, since we've been asking that to all the departments.
So right now, as of this, at the end of this current year, we have about 70 positions funded, and about 62 of them are filled. But as you guys know, that we will be receiving funding for Blueprint, which will allow us to add additional staff to meet that requirement.
All right. Ms. Pickard, did you, I saw your hand go up and go back down. Okay. Well, I don't see any other additional hands, any comments. That's easy. This is always a good day when you don't have a bunch of comments about your budget.
Thank you.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chair.
All right. So I guess we will now transition over to economic development. And Superstar Sam.
This is my last one of the day, I promise. Darlene will wrap us up with partnership, youth, and families at the end. But hi, Sam Chiriaco, Budget Office. The economic development is now under the CAO's budget, or proposed to be, for 24, and that is on page 105 of your proposed budget book. And I believe Amy Gowan and Jill Seaman will be on to discuss this budget.
Yes, thank you. We have a whole team here today. Hello, Chairman Smith and members of the council. I'm Amy Gowan, President and CEO of the Anne Arundel Economic Development Corporation. It's a pleasure to be meeting many of you for the first time virtually today. And I hope that in the very near future, I'll get to meet everyone in person, have a meet and greet, and hear about some of the issues and concerns you have in your districts. And so today I have a number of team members here with me, since this is my 4th week on the job. So I'm going to go counterclockwise and introduce everyone. I have Steve Primash, who's our Vice President of Financial Services. To my right, I have Ms. Jill Seaman, who's our Administrative Officer here today. I have Rosa Cruz, who's our Vice President of Communications and Marketing. Lisa Grundner, who's also in our Finance Department. Wes McQuillam, who's our Vice President of Business Development and Real Estate. And then our Chief of Staff, Christina Holliday, is back here. So as many of you know, Anne Arundel Economic Development Corporation is a privatized agency of county government. We're responsible for strengthening the local business climate, promoting the county as an attractive place to do business. Our core services consist of business development and also financial assistance to businesses, as well as to some extent workforce training. However, we're also ready and we stand ready to try to address any market needs that may arise that fall within our purview. I think we have a PowerPoint to share. If someone could pull that up. And I'm going to jump right into the numbers first, and then I'll talk a little bit about the services that we provide. So if we could go to the next slide. So basically, our budget request is a flat request this year of a little over 2.7 million. This is the same as we have asked for in the past, with the addition of one position, and that's for a town center revitalization manager, which we'll talk about in a moment. Our budget request is for primarily operating funds, comprised of 2.5 million towards general operating. That's basically salaries, professional fees, equipment, etc. Included is a $150,000 financial services grant, and then $30,000 for agricultural marketing. We also project that we'll be receiving a little over $433,000 in other investment income, and that's basically income from fees for our equipment rental program, interest on our loans, some interest on our CDs, and some other miscellaneous revenues. We are projecting 4.6 million in operating expenses and use of our fund balance to offset our county request. Next slide, please. So the next several slides detail our operational needs and our programs that the funding will go to support. So primarily the funding, again, supports staff salaries and benefits for about 18 employees in 5 functional areas: business development, financial services, marketing, agriculture, and our administrative functions. Our mission, as you see, is to support businesses and serve as a catalyst for business growth in the county, thereby increasing job opportunities, expanding our tax base, and improving our quality of life. And we have a number of programs that we administer. Some of them are general support to businesses, like our loans and our grant programs, as well as our inclusive venture program, which we'll talk about as well, that provides counseling to businesses. And then we have some targeted programs that, like our cyber initiatives, agricultural marketing, and our maritime programs. We also market the county through special events such as the Maryland Million, the Military Bowl, and Arundel Grown. Oh, and last but not least, we have very strong partnerships with our partners at SBDC, the counselors, small business counselors who work out of our office part of the time. And also we work very closely with our counterparts in Annapolis City. Next slide, please. This is the organizational chart. As you can see, we have the 5 functional areas we talked about, with our vice presidents overseeing each of them in blue, and then the administrative component within those areas as well. And let's go to the next slide. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Wes McQuillan to talk about inclusive ventures.
Thank you, Amy. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of the council. I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of our programs that we have here at Economic Development. The first one being our Inclusive Ventures program. This is one of our newer programs. It provides education, mentorship, and access to capital to small, minority, and women and veteran-owned businesses in the county. Since its inception, we've had 65 graduates come through the program. That's 6 cohorts. Our latest cohort, we celebrated their graduation ceremony last week, and cohort 7 is already underway. You can see sort of the makeup of those graduates, with 94% being very small businesses under 20 employees. We currently have 6 cohorts scheduled for calendar year 2023. At the end of the cohort, upon graduation, participants receive a $5,000 grant to be used for working capital. And then in addition, in 18 months after graduation, they receive an additional $5,000 grant. The next program I'm going to talk about is workforce training. One of the biggest needs that we see right now in the business community is workforce related. So we have a workforce training grant program that provides reimbursement for 50% of training costs up to $1,000 per employee. We want to encourage businesses to use the community college as a vendor. So if the community college is a vendor, we'll reimburse up to 60% of the training costs. You can see the number of employees that we've trained over the last several years. We obviously had a dip in FY 2021 as we were helping the business community with other pressing needs during that time. But we've certainly picked up in FY 2022 and 2023. So we continue to see a high demand for this program. I'm going to turn it over to Steve, who's going to talk about some of our loan programs.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and fellow members of the council. I'm Steve Pramash, Arundel Economic Development. You'll see the slide in front of you has our performance from last fiscal year and fiscal year to date on our loan programs. It's just a refresher. Volt is our small business lending program that's funded by casino dollars from the state. We also have a subsection of that, our growth fund, which is for high growth companies here in the county. Our ACR is our facade improvement program. Also has a tandem grant that we recently added for a limited time. And our next stage fund is for cybersecurity national defense companies. You can see fiscal year 22, we closed 17 total loans for 1.5 million. We're already seeing an increase in this current fiscal year. 17 loans have closed so far for 1.9 million, but we're projected to close approximately 30 loans for about $3.5 million in our current fiscal year, which is also expected to continue into the next fiscal year as well as an increase under most of our programs, primarily due to lower interest rates that we charge to help these businesses grow, and also because we added that tandem grant to our ACR loan program. So we're seeing a lot of activity in our revitalization program. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Then in terms of our agricultural programs that assist and help promote farm-based businesses, we have a farm equipment rental program. So businesses can rent from a variety of farm equipment for a reasonable cost through that program. We also have an agricultural scrap tire program that allows farms to dispose of agricultural tires, which is otherwise prohibited, and then we help to cover those costs. We have a mini grant program, so that's $1,000 one-for-one match program to help farmers expand their operations. And we also staff the Agricultural Commission, and we have an ex officio member, which advises the county executive on issues that impact the farming community, such as agribusiness, land preservation, agritourism, and other issues as well. Another major function is to engage the public to support, go back for 1 second, to support sustainable practices and locally grown food and food products. And so we promote the county's 9 farmers markets. We also have a branding campaign to encourage the public to buy produce and other items that are locally grown. It's called Arundel Grown. And so that encourages the public to buy produce and locally grown products that are produced in the county. We also publish the Arundel Grown Guide, and that is it's an annually published directory of local producers. And then we help promote the Buy Local Challenge Week each year. So that's a campaign that encourages the public to pledge to enjoy one Maryland grown product every day during the week. And this year we are planning our Arundel Grown Farm to Table tasting, which is going to be at the Great Frogs Winery in Annapolis on July 26th. So we hope to see you there. And finally, in terms of ag education, we host an annual Ag Education Day, and that's to basically engage the public on the food that they eat, where it comes from, and the businesses that bring the food from the farm to the table. And finally, we collaborate with partners such as the Future Farmers of America and the 4-H to expand youth education as well in agriculture. And so the next slide, I mentioned that we are requesting 1 additional position this year, and that is for a town center revitalization manager that would specifically focus on revitalization efforts in our town centers. So Glen Burnie, Odenton, and to some extent Annapolis. Additionally, the position will promote our Arundel Community Reinvestment Fund and our tax credit program within the 11 revitalization districts. And we're expecting that this position would be boots on the ground with an office space within the town center and also a home base here in our offices as well. And that would really allow them to develop relationships with the businesses, understand the unique needs of each of the town centers, and work closely with the business community to identify funding sources for improvements or beautification projects, act as a project manager to the extent we're awarded grants, and we have one we're about to enter into for Glen Burnie, so we're excited about that, to help the businesses promote and organize events, identify workforce needs and try to connect these businesses with resources or seeking additional resources to facilitate reinvestment in these areas. So we're asking for $100,000 to fund this position for this year. And that, I believe, concludes our presentation. So thank you very much for allowing us to present our budget today. And we are here and available to answer any questions you might have.
Well, ma'am, it's certainly nice meeting you. I don't think we've officially sort of sat down and met yet. I know it's been only a few months for you. I'll go to Ms. Ledbetter first.
Weeks.
Thank you. Just a quick question, and thank you for the great presentation. It's good to see you all again. For the cohorts that you mentioned in your presentation, I noticed that there was no veterans were not listed. Is that because there's no veterans currently participating, or is that like a subsect of those groups that were listed, if that makes sense?
Councilwoman Ledbetter, they are included in that list. It's just that when we talk about this program, when you start listing everybody that could participate, it gets a little long.
Right.
So we can keep it to small minority women owned. But yeah, so we've had a few, we just started tracking that. It's been a little hard to track. So I believe we've had 2 or 3 veterans who have graduated from the program. And if you would like specifics on that, I can certainly send that to you.
No, that's okay. I just based on the screen, I just wanted to make sure that we highlighted that for the record, that veterans are part of those groups and were built into the stats. So that's what I assumed. I just don't like to assume. Thank you.
Yep.
And Rosa and Wes, I know for many years I've worked with you all, so good job on continuing to hold down the fort over there. What I'll do is switch over to Ms. Pickard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the detailed presentation. It's good to see you again, Ms. Gowan. I look forward to our upcoming meeting in person. I did want to, like I've done, I want to keep making sure your staff realizes your value in the community. You've done an amazing job getting resources out. I know business owners that have businesses in multiple counties have always applauded our economic development team. So thank you for your hard work and dedication. And I am excited about the town center manager revitalization position. I think we're at a point in Anne Arundel County where revitalization and redevelopment is at the forefront and is a priority to making sure Anne Arundel thrives into the next century. So I think it's exciting to see, and I look forward to supporting it in the budget. So thank you.
Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that presentation. It's good to see this outstanding group. You do so much for our business community in all sectors, ag and retail, and you know the full list, and I won't name them all here, but I did have a question about the town center manager position. How would this position work with what I assume would also be some type of corporate position brought on by the company associated with the town center? Is there I guess a partnership there? Oh, how do you see that?
You're referring to the Annapolis Town Center specifically, or?
Yeah, so in my experience there was, I don't know if there currently is, a corporate employee who manages and works with the business in the town center located there. But I know we're talking about town centers for revitalization. So perhaps there's a different org chart for the corporate entity that will then work with this town center. I'm just trying to see what this position will be as far as working with whatever development corporation is revitalizing the town center. Or am I totally missing the mark here? I see shaking of a head.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think for Glen Burnie Town Center and Odenton Town Center, those areas have multiple different property owners, multiple different landlords, and multiple different management companies. So for those two specifically, it would be sort of bringing all those groups together and working together with all those different property owners. Annapolis Town Center is a little bit different, where they do have 1 or 2 ownership entities, but they do have sort of a management corporate manager sort of in place. So this position would certainly work with that group, and work with them on coordinating and promoting any events and things that they have.
Perfect. You answered that beautifully. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Wes, since you're still on that, would that so there how many town centers do we have that they would be coordinating for?
We have Glen Burnie Town Center, we have Odenton Town Center, and Annapolis Town Center are the official town centers of the county. But in addition, they would also work in our 11 revitalization districts to promote the revitalization programs that we have as well.
Okay. All right. I'm just making sure. Ms. Pickard, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, our town centers are all very, very different. So the Glen Burnie Town Center, and in case anybody didn't realize it, about 80% of the property in the town center is owned and operated by the county and has a large major tenant in the community college. So we are, that's very different than the Odenton Town Center. The Odenton Town Center has its own master plan, and the Annapolis Town Center, as everybody knows, has a couple corporate structures. So they're all very different. So this is, y'all are going to have, economic development is going to have quite a task ahead, hiring a real jack of all trades, or Jill of all trades, I should say. Excuse me. I think it's exciting for the county and for economic development to expand in this way. So thank you again.
So I got a couple of questions. Rental rates. We speak a lot about the average cost of a house and rental rates going up. Do you all keep track of rental rates when it comes to commercial entities and how that's impacted businesses?
We do. We do track historical lease rates for different sectors, be it industrial, flex, retail, office. We do monitor and keep an eye on that. Has
that increased over the last couple of years? Or
some sectors have. I mean, the industrial market in the county has increased dramatically over the past 5 years. Due to low inventory and high demand. Office has softened a bit in some markets, and retail, depending on the product, has generally stayed about the same.
I had a conversation a few months ago. I was visiting. I think I was in Prince George's County, and I was with a couple of food truck vendors. And they brought up, and this may even bleed over to workforce development as well. And they were talking about having, some of the other jurisdictions have a better food truck. I have zero knowledge on food truck industry, but essentially what they were saying was that they could go to some of these central kitchens that they had within the counties that they resided in, and then be able to produce food and go out there and sell those products via their food trucks. Here in this county, they were saying we didn't necessarily have that same capability or capacity. Are you familiar with anything that's assists food truck vendors on, since we have so many of them, being, I guess, successful in this jurisdiction?
Yeah. So thank you for bringing this up. This is something that I've been preaching for a number of years, that we've seen a high demand of these sort of these commercial kitchen or shared commercial kitchen spaces. Right. Food trucks is certainly a good example of that. A lot of times these folks need somewhere to prep their food before they get on the truck. Another example is we see these homegrown businesses that will start, making stuff out of their kitchen and selling at farmers markets, and they slowly grow the business and they get to a place where they really shouldn't be operating out of their house anymore. They should have a commercial kitchen, but it's hard for them to commit to a full-time 30-day-a-year lease. They can't afford that yet. Right. So there's that gap. So we've identified that, and I'm happy to say that we are working with an entity that has seen the same gap in the marketplace and is starting to explore opening a location for just that. So I'm hoping we can address those needs sooner or later.
And is an IVP graduate.
And yes, and a recent IVP graduate. That's a very good point.
And in addition, I would just add, I think that this is a regional issue, what he just hit on. And I think there's other, jurisdictions within our region that are struggling with that same need. It's a regional need, and there's only like a handful of those commercial kitchens.
Yeah, because they showed me a kitchen there in the other jurisdiction. I was actually impressed. It was large. It was like, holy crap. And while I was there were probably dozens of vendors, I would say, that were coming in prepping stuff. And I thought it was actually pretty cool. And I didn't realize we didn't even have anything remotely close to that capability in Anne Arundel County. I'm not saying we should if the demand is not there, but it feels like that there is a demand there for that type of resource or vendors to be leveraging some. We do it for businesses with swing space and office space that we try to come up with to help them bridge that gap. And so the school truck industry seemed like something that we could capitalize on, potentially if the demand here in the county exists, which obviously you have more visibility on that than I do, which is why I wanted to bring it up. And any additional questions for economic development? All right. I guess, Mrs. Gowan, it was good speaking with you and economic development and your team. Continue to be the superheroes you guys are when it comes to our businesses here in Anne Arundel County. And so at this time, we will transition over to partnerships for children, youth, and families.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chair Smith. Good morning, councillors. I'm delighted to be here this morning to talk about the partnership. And I think somewhere there is a slide presentation. Can you see me? Is my video off? Yes, it's off. Let me put me on. Am I on yet? Yeah, there I am.
There you are.
So I thought I would take this opportunity to really explain what a local management board is.
Pam, can I interrupt just a second? I'm sorry. This is Darlene Flynn with the Budget Office. Wanted to direct the council members to page 330 of the budget book for their operating budget. Sorry, Pam, back to you.
No problem, Darlene. I guess it would help if they're actually looking at the budget, right? So off again. So I wanted to talk just very quickly about the Maryland model for delivering human services. It's actually unique to Maryland. It was built in the 1980s, beginning in the 1980s, when a group of legislators really got together and talked about the way we deliver human services and the fact that we do health and human services in this very, very siloed way. So there was a beginning at that time of thinking about how do you get the locals, the governor, and everybody in between working together as a state to try and lift up vulnerable children and families. And here's the Maryland model. The governor creates the vision and the broad goals, and then there's a children's cabinet. The children's cabinet is made up of the secretaries of all of health and human services, the health officer, etc. Underneath the children's cabinet is something that was created in the 90s, the Governor's Office for Children. The Governor's Office for Children works between the locals and the state to make sure that there are outcomes that we're all working towards, set through the governor and his broad goals, coming through the children's cabinet related to strategies and results. And then here we have the governor's office coordinating, researching, and measuring. And now we come to local management boards, of which the Partnership for Children, Youth and Families is one of 24. First of all, we are the neutral convener for local voices. So we don't just convene all the different local department heads who all serve on my board by statute, but we also pull together people inside communities so that we really hear from the people who are most impacted by everything we do in terms of what they need and how we can improve their lives. So we spend a lot of time pulling together tables all the way through the county, doing needs assessments, finding and funding gaps in services, and collecting data. Next slide, please. So we're in statute, Maryland Human Services article established us in 1992. But then because this is essentially a recognition from the state that the locals actually do understand and know their own communities, they allowed each county to create their local management board in the way they wanted to do it. So here in Anne Arundel County, we are in what they call an instrumentality of county government. We are not a not-for-profit, nor are we a county department. We are an instrumentality, meaning that we do planning for the county. We didn't used to get any money at all from the county. In the last 4 years, we've had a piece added, which is an administrative piece from all of you. Thank you very much. The rest of our dollars come from a variety of sources. It can be state grants. We get a big lump from the state. We will go look for money depending on need. Here's the powers and the duties. They're a bit fuzzy, honestly, but what really we do, we are assessing needs, We are funding needs, we are finding gaps, and we are pulling people together. That's what we do. Next slide, please. So I think you know how we do our needs assessment here in the county. It's actually a partnership with the Community Foundation, the hospitals, the health department, mental health agency, etc. I write it every 3 years. I don't just look at all the quantitative data, but this last one that was done in 2022, I talked to over 200 community residents. And those residents can be people who live in public housing. I'm perfectly happy to sit down and talk inside public housing, but also I talk to the county executive, the superintendent of schools, and so on, teachers, pupil personnel workers, anybody who can give me a broad and unique view of what they see in terms of community need. For the most part, this needs assessment is well used by everyone to try to address the needs that we see. Next slide, please. Just some flavors of maps. One of the things that I've been able to do over the years with the help of the health department and many other pieces of data is to understand that there's a pattern and of geography and a color to our poverty in Anne Arundel County. There are neighborhoods in our county, disproportionately African American and to some extent Hispanic, where what we call the social determinants are all rising. That could be anything from a low median household income, bad water, low birth weight, life expectancy. This is just a few of the maps. I've probably got about 30 maps now that will direct me to various neighborhoods. Next slide, please. So with all that information that we gather every year, one of the things that we do with everybody in the county is create what we call the community plan. It's a collective impact model. All that means is that we try and create a common agenda for everybody. And then we try and land in the areas where we know the needs are greatest. So we have what we call a community of hope in North County, Brooklyn Park and 2 zip codes in Glen Burnie. We're down in West County, Mead 7, Annapolis, public and subsidized housing, South County, Lothian, bit of Shadyside, some of Deal. And what that means is we have built great groups of stakeholders in each of those areas that meet monthly to try to make change in those neighborhoods. And it's a way for us to direct both efforts, resources, and funding to the places that we know have the greatest needs. Next slide, please. But that's not all the partnership does. That's our planning piece. That's the planning and looking piece. We also do a whole load of direct service and have done probably since about 2001. We have a 1-800 number for resource needs. We have family navigators who both focus in on our known communities, but really work for anybody and everybody in the county with basic needs. We have built over time Spanish-speaking navigators. We have a peer re-entry navigator. That's a young man who works specifically with youth. And what those people do is navigate children, families through any services that they need. And on top of that, we have something called the cricket teams. So we call them the cricket teams in our county. They're actually what's called local care teams. And they were originally set up with this notion that despite all we do, and despite all the coordination we do, we still need to pull together people from the different departments in agencies and not-for-profits that are serving children and families to really help families with multiple needs. And I will be frank with you, as time has gone on, our families have become a lot more complex. Here are all our teams. Our regular cricket team is the one that we started with. We have 25 direct service workers, supervisors, etc., from not-for-profits and agencies throughout the county who will spend an hour with each family trying to basically figure out what's wrong here, where are all the resources, and then figure out who's on first with that family. It's a beautiful thing. I actually chair that one. It meets twice a month. We actually see probably 8 families every 2 weeks. We also have an early childhood cricket that focuses specifically on early childhood. We have Bricket, which is focused on families who are about to be homeless or homeless. There's a Silver Cricket that's actually organized by the Department of Aging and Disabilities. And we now have a Victim Services Cricket, which is specifically for victims in our juvenile services system. That can be domestic violence, any sort of victim services that any person needs. We actually won an award in 2019 for our teams for innovation, so we're really happy about that. Next slide, please. We also do kinship care. So kinship is a very strange and neglected piece of human services. These are the families, the aunts, the uncles, the friends who stand up and take care of children for a variety of reasons, because the original parents die, because they are no longer able to care for children, for an enormous amount of reasons. Other people step in, and they are what we call kinship families. And those families take on those children without any subsidy. There's no foster care subsidy or anything like that. So over time, we worked with social services to build what we call a support group for kinship care, and one staff person who is completely knowledgeable of all of the resources that kinship families can access, including legal support. One of the things that's very difficult for kinship families is having the right sort of legal support to manage children when they have children. They then have to have the legal right to work with those children in school systems, in medical care, and so on. So very, very worthwhile program. We have had it now for 6 years. Our support groups continue to grow, and we still have a kinship navigator to help those families. Next slide, please. Our family stability programming started in 2014. We started it as a result of seeing there were more and more about to be homeless and homeless families in the county. The problem with homeless families is many of them that do not meet the federal definition of homelessness because they are paying their way in a hotel, or they're not on the street. They might be in a church basement. They might be doubled up with 6 other families, but effectively they are homeless. The federal government does not consider them homeless. So sometimes it's very hard to use federal funds for those families. We're very keen on prevention because, frankly, it is way cheaper to prevent a family from being homeless than deal with a family once a family is homeless. And that has become more and more real as time has gone on. So we have a shelter, we have what we call shelter diversion, which is rapid rehousing for families who are already homeless. We do homelessness prevention. We started doing eviction prevention in partnership with ACDS during the pandemic. We also created Operation Open Doors, which is a specifically school-based program. School pupil personnel workers meet and find children who are homeless in the school system. They refer those families and those children to us in something called Operation Open Doors. When it started, we had access to real vouchers for families. Those vouchers dried up. We now have some temporary vouchers for ACDS, and we are desperately hoping to continue that program. On any given day, there is at least 1,200 children homeless in our school system any night. I imagine there's about 1,500 families homeless on every given night. They're very difficult numbers to actually be accurate upon. We also have a program in North County that's actually got a lot of federal recognition at the moment. We called it the Hip Hop Program. It takes homeless youth off the streets in North County. And first of all, we assess them, we work with them. We have a house that we use in Baltimore City that gets them stabilized. We do a whole set of intensive case management in all our programs, but particularly in our Hip Hop program, to try to get children in some place either reunited with their families. We do try to do that where we can, or either doubled up working together at work, in college, with mental health services and so on. Our federal delegation are very interested in that program. That corridor where Brooklyn Park is a place where a lot of children get trafficked. One of our kids we're working with now is a trafficking victim. We're actually working with people who are professionals in trafficking up in Brooklyn Park, and we're having some great success with that child, not a child, 18 years old, but had been trafficked. So that's where we're very focused, obviously, going forward. Next slide, please. This is our residents served. You can see between, for the last year and a half, 942 unique families, 337 families in our community resource teams, 442 homeless families, families at risk of homelessness. We've provided 497,000 families with food, and I'll get to that when I talk about our budget asks. And we've provided assistance to 36 victims. Our victim coordinator is also a Spanish speaker. So we have served 30% with limited English. And the one I haven't talked about, we also have money for youth program, and we mentor and support youth. And we have mentored and supported 500 youth. We have a very neat program that specifically targets children with mental health issues. That program is massively oversubscribed. We actually closed the waiting list in May. So we are doing an awful lot of work. Next slide, please. So where are we now? So remember, we have been around this county since 1996. We lost an awful lot of money in the recession. We had to scramble and build back up. And really, since 2014, we have really been building from strength to strength. Well, along came the pandemic. In our needs assessment in 2022, we took the figures from the Alice report from United Way, and we have over 200,000 people in this county who do not make enough on any given day to actually meet all their basic needs. We have another 50,000 who live below $50,000 a year in this county. And here's where we are in terms of post-pandemic. And I say all the time, the people who were least able to cope with the pandemic, who were most vulnerable during the pandemic, are my families. They are the vulnerable families who lost jobs, couldn't work at home, built up debt, went seasonal, had their hours restricted, couldn't pay their bills, lost more family members, disproportionately impacted by death, 4 times the rate in the African-American community, 8 times the case rate in the Hispanic community, more trauma, all of these things during the pandemic. A lot of it was helped by federal funding. And you can see on my slide on the left, these are all the things. When the federal government said, guys, the pandemic is over, and they cut all those benefits, they forgot all of the families that I work every day for whom the pandemic was an absolute disaster. And here are all the post-pandemic threats, frankly, not just for my families, but for all of us. But when you are at the lowest income level, these all on their own become a nightmare. We've got inflation, we've got skyrocketing costs for food, we've got rising rents. We've got landlords in the driving seat of rents. This is nothing. I'm really not knocking landlords. Many of our private landlords are struggling, but because there is such a lack of both affordable housing and rentals, it makes it very difficult to find. If you have got any form of eviction on your record, debts that you owe, any form of old criminal record, you are going to find it incredibly difficult to find rental housing. We've got food pantries closing, we've got debt built up, and so on and so on. Our not-for-profits are struggling, our churches are struggling, and let's not even get into affordable childcare, because there is less and less of that too. So from where we are as the Partnership for Children, Youth and Families, it is a perfect storm. We are no longer with our fingers in the dike, we have got the water coming over the top. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk about our budget request. Well, as I said, we get a very small amount of money from the county, about $350,000, that funds 3 strictly administrative positions. And that's because we find it really hard to fund administrative positions through grants. Everybody wants us to fund programs, quite rightly. So we're asking for a simple cost of living increase for those positions of 5%. We will not get a merit increase unless we figure it out through grants, because we are a grant-funded agency apart from these dollars. We have 32 county contract employees. They deliver excellent services, and we're a pretty stable organization. Next slide, please. Our big request is around family homelessness and homeless prevention. You can see that it's now at $700,000. This is partly, well, really three reasons. Federal funding disappearing, other funding that we used to use disappearing, other funding agencies struggling with giving us funding. And so United Way funding going away, state funding going away, other funding going away. And yet 1,000+ families homeless in the county on any given night. We like to spend as much as we can on preventing eviction, but we are not an eviction prevention agency. We are not just about paying rent. We do that now, but that is not my preferred way of dealing with families about to be homeless, because rent is only one of the issues. By the time we are working with a family, there are multiple issues. It needs intensive case management. It needs financial literacy. We usually are dealing with families with trauma and mental health issues. We have childcare to sort out. The case management is intense, and that's how we prefer to do our homeless prevention. It's the same thing with rapid rehousing. Obviously, it's a housing first model, but we stay with our families for a year, making sure that we visit, we talk, we try to make contact 3 times a week. We work through every issue, what they're eligible for, if they're underemployed, if there are mental health and substance abuse issues, if there are old felonies, whatever is preventing that family moving into stability is where we are going with that family. We keep excellent records. We know a whole lot about families. We know, for instance, that 84% of them are female head of household. Imagine trying to be a single parent in this county with children, given everything we see now. From July to December 2023, we served almost the same number of families as we did in the whole of the 12 months of 2022. Next slide, please. Food obviously has been a huge issue well before the pandemic, guys. I don't want anybody to think that food became an issue. Prior to the pandemic, we were already doing pantries on the go through and working with our food bank on stand pantries using money from Maryland Food Bank and United Way. When the pandemic hit, we used all the information that you saw earlier in our communities of hope to increase those pantries on the go in areas of most need. And then throughout the pandemic, we coordinated everybody who was doing food. So every church, every stand-up pop-up thing, we tried to coordinate to make sense of it all. It was an enormous undertaking. Obviously, we worked incredibly closely with ACDS, with our food bank, and with Maryland Food Bank. You can see the sorts of numbers that we have served. We think it's around 600,000 individuals and 206,000 families. You can see the food rate of insecurity for our county. It's around 50,000 who are always insecure, and 8.3%. We have 16,000 food insecure children. There's racial disparities in there. We have 75,000 families who live in a food desert. So we're asking for 2 things. We are asking to continue to keep our pantries going into the next year with the hope that we're going to start to see some let up in the disaster that is food at the moment. And I could probably spend the rest of your day talking about all of both the national and world issues that are making our county issues more and more difficult, including, of course, the war in Ukraine. But we want to continue to ensure equity. We want to continue to ensure protein at pantries and keep that work going. But I think many of you know that the county executive has also signed an executive order to create the first food council for our county. We want to house that in the partnership. We have the data and the partners and the coordination aspects. We are going to have one person who manages that. And our intent, guys, is to create a long-term plan for food insecurity and food access. And that long-term plan is not going to be standalone pantries. There has to be an innovative look at how we deal with our issues around food deserts, around access, around nutrition, and how we work inside neighborhoods to change all of the dynamics that are really not just about food. And so I think we're already doing that in our communities of hope. The creation of the Food Council is a way to really bring all stakeholders together, frankly, including the families who are impacted, including the families who are struggling, so we can make our best plan for increasing access and decreasing insecurity. So that is our ask for food. And next slide, please. This is the last year we will ask this, but we started this program in partnership with the Annapolis Immigration Justice Network at the beginning of the pandemic. We have funded it throughout for 2 years. This is going to be our 3rd year. The partnership does the basic needs piece of it. So we do all of the piece that a youth and their family might need to have their basic needs met. AIJN takes refugees from the border, and these are young people who are allowed through the border, even though we've got Title 42. They are refugees. They have the opportunity to get some legal standing in the county. And AIJN works with attorneys who work on a very, very reduced rate to get these youth legal in our county. It has been an exceptional program. It has met its goals every year and exceeded its goals. In 2023, I just talked to Suzanne, who's the executive director. The grant goal is 33. They expect to serve 60 youth. So far, we have 30 immigrant youth with legal representation, 40 more have legal assessments, and AIJN just received the Legal Excellence Award from the Maryland Bar. I have absolute confidence in the next year for this program. It is fantastic. It's a wonderful program, and we're asking for that to be continued. Next slide, please. This is a really cute one. It's a very small amount of money. One of our convenings over the last year has been around childcare. We had a childcare summit in September. Over 200 people showed up. That's how much concern there is about childcare in our county. And then we created a planning group that has met since the summit. Believe it or not, every 2 weeks, we've created a childcare plan and a collective agenda. And we are going to have a new summit this September, which we have got to set the date for in the next week. And you will all be invited to talk specifically with the business community and economic development about a new and innovative model for childcare. One of the things that became obvious in our needs assessment and in all our planning was that there's actually a load of money out there for childcare, but most of it emanates from MSDE and other large bureaucracies. Nobody understands it, and everybody gives up applying for it. And when I'm talking everybody, I'm talking about low-income parents as well as low-income providers. So what everybody said to us was, we need a childcare navigator to navigate through the bureaucracy and make sure that the small childcare providers and the parents who most need help actually get the help they need. So that's what this position will do. It will sit with our other navigators, but we will work with our childcare providers, most of whom we know personally, to make sure that that person is on call as both the providers and the parents try to access state dollars. So that's the point in that. And I think that might be my next slide. I'm sure you're all hungry now, and I hope your questions are not going to be too tough. But is that my last slide, Darlene? Okay. Thank you very much, everyone.
Well, thank you. I will go over to Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And you are correct, Dr. Brown. I am getting a little hungry, but I want to make sure, I want to be clear that the information presented in your budget has been funded by the county executive, correct? None of your asks are over and above what's already been funded or in the proposed county executive budget?
Correct.
Okay, great, perfect. And then, of course, I have to just say a thank you. I know I do this a lot, but it's important you and your team work amazingly collaboratively with my office and our constituent service work to bring hope and help to some of our most vulnerable constituents. And you've been doing a great job every day. We don't necessarily interact every day, but at least weekly or monthly, I feel like these days. And you tie it all together with the Department of Aging and some of our other services. So a huge thank you to you and your team, and keep fighting the fight. A lot of need out there.
Thank you. And thanks to you, Councilwoman Pickard. I know you're always in the trenches with us and you're always fighting hard, and I really appreciate you.
Ms. Ledbetter?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two unrelated questions. Thank you for the great presentation. Really appreciate it. Very informative. I wanted to first ask, on that last slide that you showed us, the very last bullet point said, waiting on blueprint dollars for the early childhood education. If you wouldn't mind just elaborating a little bit on the context of that.
I certainly will. So for those of you who've been following blueprints, this is the enormous injection of cash supposedly for our most vulnerable children, really honestly to address the opportunity gap. That's the point in blueprint. Because it was started late, because there is so much money, and let me be frank, because MSDE is at the moment a rather unmanageable bureaucracy that is even arguing with its own board to manage blueprint, everything related to blueprint is delayed. So I promised Chris Trumbauer a year ago that the money for blueprint would be released and that we, the partnership, would be going after it with a vengeance, both around early childcare, the opportunity gap, and so on. Frankly, it is bottlenecked in MSDE along with a whole set of other services. It's a dilemma. I think it's becoming more and more obvious to more and more people. I just saw a marvelous editorial on MSDE and the blueprint that is, I would say, less than flattering. How about that? We need those monies to come down so that we can start to implement the sorts of services we need for all of the children who need them. And that's as honest as I can be without getting rude.
Well, I appreciate your frankness. And so to be clear for anyone that were to be watching this video at home or later, that is blueprint funds from the state.
Correct.
It's not county funds from blueprint through AACPS. It's from the
blueprint
state.
Funds that should be coming down for early childhood.
Okay, perfect. Mr. Chair, may I ask my second question? Different line.
Yes, ma'am, please.
Thank you. I noticed on the food desert slide, and I just wanted to get a clarification. In my recent conversations with the Department of Health, there was a conversation around, I think, an emerging food desert in the Lothian area in South County. And I was curious as to whether or not, because I didn't see Lothian listed on that slide, are the residents affected by that included in that 75,000 number that was on that slide, or because it's an emerging, are they not yet included in that number?
They're probably not included in that number. Most of my data comes from the health department, and health data lags. It always lags because they're always waiting for the next piece. But the area that you're talking about, it's the area, and you probably know it, where there are mobile homes. It's, it's Sands Road. It's all of that area. It's an increasingly impoverished area for all of the reasons that I've been talking about. We also have a lot of kinship families down in those mobile homes, grandparents, great-grandparents. We're getting an increasing number of great-grandparents now looking after children, living in some really, appalling conditions. I have spent the last 2 weeks trying to figure out how to get a mobile home rehabbed for a grandma who's looking after her child, and it's so difficult. But they are the families, and they are, you know, the non-traditional families who are ending up in mobile homes because there's nowhere else to go, frankly.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thank you for all the hard work you're doing to assist those families and all of the families across the county.
You're very welcome.
And Ms. Summer.
Good morning or good afternoon now. Thank you as always. All of our social services departments do amazing work, and Pam, you've always been at the forefront of everything. I'm particularly excited to hear about the Food Council and ways we can coordinate that around the county, because I think we are not seeing a decrease in the need for food. So I look forward to hearing the work that you do, but I just want to thank you too for all your work. I've watched it and been involved with it for years with the school system for our homeless youth and our immigrant youth, and it's really made a huge difference in those children's lives. So thank you.
You're very welcome. I'm glad to see you on the council.
All right, Pam, I don't see any additional hands raised. As always, appreciate your advocacy on the families in this county. You've been at this for what, for many years, and so
too long
involved. Yeah. So, but just notice your efforts have not gone unnoticed, and so we will carry the torch certainly to assist where we can. If there are no additional questions, are there any other comments to be brought before this county council? All right. I think I heard Madam Vice Chair talk about hunger here a few minutes ago, so I share her feelings. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, Allison Pickard.
Is there a second?
Ledbetter, second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion carries. The county council is adjourned until tomorrow, Thursday, May 11th at 7 p.m., where we will meet in our chambers in Annapolis to hear from the public on the proposed FY24 budget for Anne Arundel County. You can sign up to speak using our online form from 3 p.m. tomorrow. Look for the spotlight on the council's website if you missed the online sign-up period. You can also sign up in the lobby before meeting begins tomorrow. So see everyone tomorrow at 7 p.m. Take care.